Let's reconvene. Okay, I am reconvening the meeting of the Board of Directors of the Menlo Park Fire Protection District of July 19, 2022. We are now in open session, and we will start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Please join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands,
one
one
nation,
nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We had a closed session of the board meeting of the board tonight at 5, and there is no reportable action from the closed session. I will move immediately to public comment number 2. If anybody has anything, any item that is not on the agenda, you may be recognized now.
If anyone has a public comment, please use the raise hand feature or press *9 if you called in. And Director Bernstein, I see none. You may continue.
Okay. Item number 1 is a report of the fire chief for discussion and direction.
Thank you, directors. My report for this month begins with our COVID update. We are no different than the rest of society right now. The current variant is certainly hitting us, and it seems to not discriminate against anyone that got the vaccination or that's had it in the past. So currently we have 10 new COVID cases since our last report last month. And, you know, it's like I said, we're very similar to the rest of society, not really impacting us operationally. We're not finding any negative impacts related to our ambulance service or what we call our wall times. And that's how much time the ambulances need to spend at the hospitals transferring patients. So right now our operations are pretty sound. Couple items that I just wanted to report on. One of interest was, as I was talking with Director Bernstein, was just an update on our 4th of July, what happened. So I reached out to John Johnston, who's reached out to PD to kind of get some impact from them on what they have witnessed. And from East Palo Alto, they have the shot spotter numbers as a device they use out there to supposedly recognize gunfire. So it works on 4th of July. In 2021, the shot spotter reported a little over 10,000 hits. In 2022, it was about 8,300, so a 22% decrease. Same thing was similar in calls for the city of Menlo Park. This is coming from their PD, calls for service related to fireworks. In 2020, there was 27 calls. In 2021, there was 45. In 2022, it was back down to 22 calls. And just anecdotally, we've had the same reports. I checked in with Chief Coyle, who reported that we had no fire-related incidents on the 4th of July. And in the prior year, we had 5 incidents during the regular fireworks hours. So I'm sure everybody heard, you know, I had my front door open and could certainly hear what sounded like Beirut coming from somewhere in our district. So there was certainly some activity there. There was a lot of speculation from police chiefs and anecdotal information that the supply chain issues coming out of China reduced the number of illegal fireworks illegal and legal fireworks that were available. But that was it. Nothing unusual or eventful on 4th of July for us, which was good. Quick update on Fire Station 4. So we have a little delay that's in part caused by a substitution of our electrical subcontractor. We actually held a hearing week before last. The general contractor asked to substitute the electrical subcontractor because of lack of performance. So I held the hearing. I was the hearing officer, and we determined that the contractor could make that substitution. As a result, we're a little bit delayed. We're anticipating fire station occupation in October. And then once we occupy it, we'll demo the house behind it. And we're hoping for a grand opening in January. So we're off by a couple months already. That certainly could change depending on circumstances, probably for it'll move later rather than earlier than that. But that's our current status. And the grand opening, when I say that, that will be a formal event where we will invite the board and other dignitaries and the press and retirees and have some ribbon cutting. So that will be great. Academy graduation occurred since our last board meeting. We had that on Friday, July 1st. We have 7 new probationary employees that are our firefighters that are on the floor now and riding on the fire engines. Super excited to add those members to our family. We had a retiree luncheon on July 11th at Harry's Hofbrau House. There was probably about 20, 25 retirees, a good group of folks there, just shared some updates and information with them. And Chief Chappell-Human was there too and shared some information, and then gave the retirees a tour of the museum at Station 6 afterwards. The management audit stakeholder interviews are underway. If you haven't had your interview board members, you should be having one shortly. A good percentage of our, I think, executive leadership have had their interviews already. And then finally, I just wanted to update the board and probably more specifically the public, since I chatted about some challenges with our ERAF revenues in San Mateo County's position on our ERAF funding at the last board meeting. I just wanted to close the loop with the public. The board's all aware of the good news that the San Mateo County Auditor's Office has now taken a new, better position for us, and has indicated they now believe that we're entitled to our ERAF funding as we've received in the past. So those ERAF funds are no longer in jeopardy, and that was obviously going to be significant for us. We were talking about a 7.1, approximately 11% loss of revenues in the current fiscal year, and just increasing in future years. So that's really good news for us. With that ends my report, and I'll turn it back over to you, Director.
Okay, questions for the chief?
I think that was a good news on the last part, Chief, in terms of the county rethinking through the ERAF money. So I don't know what kind of arm twisting you did, but you did a good job of twisting the arm.
I will give a tip of the hat to Hanson Bridget and our attorney Steve and his partner in crime there, Mike, that really helped us strategize the right way to help gently convince San Mateo County to see the light. So that was really good partnership with our law firm and our attorneys. So
Good job. Good job to both.
Mark, just a quick question regarding the ERAF situation. You said it was the county auditor's office. Do you mean the controller or who? I didn't even know.
Oh, sorry. Yes, it's county controller. Sorry.
Okay.
In my last jurisdiction, it was auditor controller, but it was the county controller's office that reached out to us. My guess is that behind the scenes also, that was the county counsel or the county attorney weighed in on that also. But
Okay, thank you.
The message came from the county controller's office.
Okay, thanks.
Other questions? Chief, I have a couple. Let me ask you, on page 5 of the summary report that you have here, and I mean this positively, I'm not being picayune here, but you said about the COVID situation, you said mandatory testing of all personnel that began at the beginning of January is proving successful. And I was just curious what it is that's proving successful at.
That's a great question. So we still have, we mandatorily test for our staff employees when they come in on Monday, and for our folks that are on shift work when they come in on their first cycle of their shift. And it's, yes, to clarify, it's being successful at identifying those that have COVID and then sending them home and not exposing others in the workplace. So it's being successful in catching those cases early so that we don't have additional exposures at work.
Okay, actually, that's, it's interesting, and I hadn't realized this because I was thinking about this with my work where we have twice a week testing going on. Ours isn't being very successful because when we find that somebody is positive, they've already been hanging out with people for a couple days. But if you do it on Monday morning, before they come into the office, it actually makes sense because the contagion is only 2 days prior to being positive or something. So that leaves Sunday, Saturday. And if the same thing with the new crew coming on, they haven't had chance to infect each other or anything at that point.
That's exactly right.
Okay, yeah, maybe our testing days are Tuesdays and Fridays, and those don't work very well. And so, thank you, that was.
Sure.
And then let me ask also about, oh, I just had a comment about the fireworks. As you know, I was concerned about at the last meeting. I say two things, and one's positive, one's negative. Positively, I think one of the changes that we saw, which I don't know it would relate to the shortage of fireworks or, supply chain issues, but we saw a narrower window this year. So rather than starting in June or even May, like they did last year, they started a little bit later. And they ended earlier. I've heard some, but very, very little since July 4th, where last year it went on for several weeks after the 4th of July. So somehow I think the window of fireworks is narrowing, which is a positive. The other thing, though, is reading next door and comments of neighbors and so forth. A lot of neighbors felt that it was much worse. And I think one of the things that's happening is we're having really, really loud explosions, louder than we had before, just in general. So I think, I don't know if the shot spotter can records decibel levels or just frequency, but I think we're getting bigger fireworks in which rattles windows and wakes up neighborhoods. And so when they go off at 2 or 3 in the morning, it's really very hard on the elderly and on people with PTSD and so forth. I think I would like to see us in, March or April of next year, meet with the police departments and see if there's anything we can do to mitigate the fireworks, because it really is a problem. That's all I had to say on that issue. Any other comments about the chief's report? Okay, thank you. We'll move then to the consent calendar. And I'm gonna, just before anybody makes a motion, I'd like to ask a question about one of the items, because I think it can be we can get rid of it right away, and at least for me, we can go on. Can you look please at page 25 of the packet? This relates to the weed abatement program. It's a chart that it's a chart here about the collection on the fees and so forth. I think we spend a lot of time on this, so I'm not really questioning it, but it's kind of surprising to see, for example, that the cost of, well, let's just take the first one, cost of abating the weeds at Fordham and Purdue cost $125, but the administrative cost for it is $1,063. And I've heard people said, well, they just don't want to bother. They'll just let us cut the weeds for them. But it just strikes me, if you can get these things cut for $125, I'm not sure why someone would want to be paying close to $1,200 to get it done. Do you have any insights into the, I don't know if the administrative costs have been going up. I assume administrative costs are our costs. Is that right?
Yes, I mean, that's to cover our costs, and it's certainly Now, granted, I haven't been around that long, but in the last department I came from, we set it high on purpose because we didn't want to be people's weed abatement clearance service. And so we wanted it to be big enough to cause people to think, but that is in theory to recoup our costs in full for administration of the program and the clearance.
Okay.
Any other questions that you have, I'd have to refer back to our fire marshal who's on the call.
Yeah, again, I'd heard people see it as a convenience and they just had it done. It costs so much more to have it done by us than if they did it themselves. Although maybe the mass weed cutting by Timberline is, they're able to bring their costs way down or something. But, yeah, it seemed very high. I don't think admin was high. I know we spend a lot of time on it. We spend a lot of board time on it. And, so, okay, well, I don't have any other questions about it. That was the only one.
I have a quick question, Chuck, on the finance. Just so we may be able to dispense with it quickly. And that is on page 11. And as long as under the chart, it start with the first sentence with in May 2022, the general fund, and it talked about there was some total funds received in a total of 265,000, 49,000 was in property tax, and 216,000 in other operating. So I just want to know what that other operating dollar amount, because I couldn't find where it said what that revenue was.
Michelle, could you promote Long Lamb?
He's
He's-
promoted and I've asked him to unmute. But let me just take a quick run down the hall. I'll be right back.
I just want to know, it didn't state what the funds coming in was for.
No problem.
or
We'll get that
I'm
answer.
I'm in the directors. Let me take a look real quick and I'll get back to, I don't know on top of my head what the other operating is right now, but I'll take a look real quick.
Yeah, and if not, I mean, won't stop the consent calendar, just kind of curious to know, and maybe sometime in other reports, you can kind of, whatever
Sure.
that is, make a quick note somewhere on the side of that, what it is, if it's not really clear.
Got it.
I want to make a comment about this while we're waiting for Long's answer. And that is, Long has reformatted that chart immediately above this in a way that I think is much more helpful than it has been in the past. So for example, you can see the budget for 21-22. You can see what we actually spent in May and what the year to date is. And the next column gives an estimate of what the annual is going to be. And that column then can be compared with the first column so that we can see how we're doing. Before, they used to show a variance between like a few months worth compared to the whole year, which wasn't helpful. But this is much more helpful because it kind of tells us where we're going to be at year end. And that then we can deal with as a variance, because that means what's going to vary from what we expected. So I think this is a huge improvement in what's happened in the past.
Director Jones, so I pull up the report. So the other operating revenues that you're seeing there is a combination of license and permits. We received about 92,000 in license and permit for the month. The other is 36,000 for Slack National Accelerator Lab. We have a contract with them that we get is for an extra service that we provide to them. So we get like a monthly fees from them. Then we have 10,000 in rent warehouse. The 10,000 in rent warehouse is we charge FEMA 120,000 a year for the use of the warehouse, the special operation warehouse that we have. And the rest of that is about 67,000 of that is for HOP property tax.
For what, please, Lon?
It is the homeowners property tax relief.
Yeah, and that's the Hopter, right?
Oh, yes.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, anybody like to make a motion about the consent, for the consent calendar? Oh, I'm
I'll
sorry,
make a, I'll
Virginia, I
move to
saw your-
approve.
Go ahead, I saw your hand. Do you want to ask a question?
Yeah, well, I just want to just commend Long. I mean, the finance, thanks for pointing out the differences, Chuck. I just want to thank Long for really improving the formatting and, well, not formatting, but just how the numbers are laid out, the financials. And, you know, we've had numerous discussions on this to improve, you know, how things are laid out. And so Long, thank you so much for taking the feedback and for, I think I agree with Chuck, improving, you know, our financials so that it's more readable. So I'll make a motion to approve the consent calendar.
I'll second that.
Was that you, Robert?
Yes, that's me.
Okay, so motion made by Virginia, seconded by Robert to approve the consent calendar, which is items 2 through 6. Anybody like to pull anything off the consent calendar?
I think it's too late to pull anything off, right? Because there was a motion made.
No, I think you can do it once the motion's made, but in any case, let's just hear if there is something. Any comments on anything before we vote?
Anybody has a public comment, please use the raise hand feature or press *9 if you called in. And I see none. You may continue.
Okay, we'll go ahead with proceed with the roll call vote, Michelle, if you would.
Director Jones,
Aye.
Director Crawley,
Aye.
Director McLaughlin,
Aye.
Director Solano,
Aye.
Director Bernstein.
Aye. Okay, consent calendar is approved and we'll go to a regular agenda, item number 7 now.
Good evening, Board of Directors. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen really quick. Are you able to see the screen?
Yes,
Yes, okay. I'm going to be sharing some data that was presented to the DEI Ad Hoc Committee. And this data will include the district's workforce representation in regards to race and ethnicity and gender, as well as the representation for our district population, and the data from the last firefighter exam that we conducted for the district. There's a lot of tables and a lot of information, so please feel free to stop and ask me questions if you have questions. In the interim, I'm going to be looking at this screen because my presentation's on this screen, but if you have questions, please just shout out. So the first screen is data from the US Census Bureau, and this is vintage 2021. And these are 3 of the cities that we serve. I was unable to capture data from unincorporated areas and reached out to the US Census Bureau to determine if unincorporated areas were included in the city. I didn't get a call back. So these are close estimates, if not exact, from the US Census Bureau. So the population estimates were as of July 1, 2021, and it's for Atherton, East Palo Alto, and Menlo Park. So the population estimates are highlighted with the brown shading at the top, and then the percentages for each category are beneath that. For each city, I highlighted kind of the 2 highest population distributions. So for Atherton, the white, not Hispanic, would be the highest. Asian would be the second. For East Palo Alto, Hispanic or Latino or Latinx is the highest distribution for ethnicity, and white, not Hispanic, is the second. And then for Menlo Park, it's white, not Hispanic, the first, and then Hispanic or Latino Latinx, the second with 15.8%. So I wanted to share this information so we could kind of understand the demographics of the areas we serve and then of our workforce. At the next table, what I did is I took each of these percentages times the population to get a total per category and then a percentage. So just basically averaging all of the 3 cities. Again, the percentage for each category times their population, the population of that city, and then getting a sum and then a percentage. And so this table basically shows that breakdown. And because of the, I guess the varied, you know, between the 3 agencies, that varied kind of demographics, it balances out a little bit more with the percentages. So on this sheet, the white, not Hispanic, lowered considerably to 38.21%, and then Hispanic, Latino, or Latinx to 32.6. So those being the 2 highest when we look at the district population as a whole or aggregate. The next slide is showing the district's current workforce representation. So this is all employees, so not elected positions, but does include temporary positions. And this is the count and percentage for each category for the district. So right now, currently, we have 154 employees, including temporary staff, and the percentage for each category is listed to the right column. So the top one would be the white, not Hispanic at 81.2%. And then the next highest percentage when you're looking at the district as a whole would be the Asian, and that would be 7.1%. Then what I did is I took it and I broke it down kind of a little further. The first group, as we looked at the workforce representation for line, firefighter, driver, engineer, fire captains, as well as chief, battalion chiefs, division chiefs, deputy chief, and chief with the same categories, the count for each, and then the percentage of each ethnic or race category. So the highest, again, white at 86.2, and in this for this group, the next highest would be the Hispanic or Latinx at 6%. The next table, we'll look at our fire prevention division. And for the fire prevention division, I didn't look at just the sworn inspectors. I looked at the whole division, which would include support staff, which would be non-safety. And for this group, the counts are listed with the percentage. The white non-Hispanic is represents 73% of the fire prevention division, and then it's kind of distributed equally among the 3 categories: Asian 9%, Black or African American 9%, and then Hispanic or Latinx 9%. And that's for our fire prevention, which includes support miscellaneous staff, which could be UNREP or ASME. The next slide includes civilian, but because I already counted some civilian and fire prevention, they weren't included in this group. So this would be more administrative support staff or administration. Again, with the same categories, the highest for this one would be our white, not Hispanic at 61%. And then we have Asian, 31%. And then the next 2 are tied: Black and African American 4% representation, and Hispanic Latinx 4% representation for our civilian employees. And then I looked, did the same for gender. I looked at gender representation across the district. So I didn't break this down by division, but looked at the district as a whole. For females, out of our 154 current employees, we have 16 females, which represents 10.4% of the workforce at the district. And for male, we have 138, which represents just close to 90% of our workforce. We didn't have any employees designated as non-binary, so that would be a 0 for that category. The next table that I'd like to share is the firefighter recruitment that the district conducted in 2021. This first slide represents the gender for the firefighter recruitment. So we had 679 applicants apply for this position with the district. Out of those, we had 618 male, 33 female, and 28 declined to state on their voluntary self-identification form. Out of those that applied, the applicants that passed the written, we had 405 male pass the written, 18 female, and 3 that declined to state. So 426 out of the 679 passed the written. And out of those that passed the written, those that were invited to interview were all male. We had 69 male invited to interview, 0 female, and 0 declined to state. And then the next slide goes over the breakdown by race ethnicity for the same firefighter recruitment that was conducted in 2021. The first column to the right of the ethnic group is the count for those that applied in each of the categories. Out of those that applied, the next column represents those that passed the test. And then after that is those candidates that interviewed from each group. So those that we invited to interview for American Indian, we had 2 candidates, Asian or other Pacific Islander 4, 0 Black or African American, 15 Hispanic or Latinx, 0 2 or more races. We had 46 white, not Hispanic, 2 that declined to state, and those total the 69 males that we invited to interview. The next column is the percent that were that we interviewed from each ethnic or race group out of those that passed the test. So out of the 2 American Indians that interviewed, we had 4 that passed that test. So it was a 50%. And then the last column is the percent interviewed versus total interviewed. So the representation of the 69 that we interviewed, out of those 69, we had almost 3% in American Indian representation, 5.8 Asian or other Pacific Islander, 0 Black or African American, 21.7% Hispanic or Latinx, 0 2 or more, 66.7% white, not Hispanic or Latinx, and then 2.9% that declined to state. And then the next slide is the hires that we made in 2021 and in 2022 from this list. Out of this list, we hired 16. All 16 were male. 13 of those hires were white, not Hispanic. 2 identified with 2 or more races, and 1 identified as Hispanic or Latinx. And then one other thing that I would just like to add to this is that the cutoff that we did for who the district invited to the oral panel was based on the highest score for the written exam. For EMTs, for paramedics, we took anyone that passed. So for all, because the district has basically a desire to staff paramedics, first, we have it in our contract with IAFF, and we focus on paramedics. We accepted anyone with a passing score for a paramedic into our interviews for first round as well as second round. For the EMT, we owned the first round of interviews. What we did, which was the first set of hires from this list, we took a 96% or above. When we had to go down, because we had to hire more, we wanted to hire additional candidates. We had more openings to fill. We went down to a 93% or above. That resulted in the 69 that we hired for the position of recruit firefighter. The last slide that I have is one that I think maybe Director Jones wanted to kind of talk about, but I paused there to see if anyone has any questions regarding the data collected or presented for the workforce representation.
I do.
Yes.
I do, Chuck.
Go ahead.
Waiting for Chuck to recognize.
I-
Chuck, I have a question.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Francine, is there a way that we could get a copy of the entire the protocols of the selection process and the tests that are used, like a sample testing or something, so we could see, is there a psychological test given, the different steps? What physical agility do they have to do? Do they have to write like an observational rights exercise? Is there a way that we can get a copy of that and maybe have it go to our HR committee and Robert and I can look it over and then evaluate it a little bit and bring it back to the full board?
Yeah, because the test is confidential and we don't own the property of that, what I can share is I have sample test data and the test validation from the FCTC that goes over the different components, and I can bring that to the HR committee.
Fine, yeah, I don't want the questions, but yeah, I'm sure like in law enforcement, they have the sample written tests that they provide and things like that. And the actual steps in the process, are the applicants polygraphed?
No,
Are they drug tested?
we do not drug test, no.
Oh, okay. All right. That's all I have, Chuck. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay. Chuck,
Yes, go ahead, Jim.
Francine, do we know what criteria was applied in deciding who advanced to an interview after passing the written exam?
Yeah, so the criteria that was used to determine who would go to the interview was based on the top scorers. So what the district did is they took all the scores, and because we ended up having a week's worth of interviews, and at each score level, sometimes there are multiple ties. Like I believe it was at the score, like at the 92%, we had 15 people at that rank. So we had to basically limit it, or what we did is we limited it based on the top score and brought in candidates for the first round that scored at a 96% or above. And then at the second round that we went down to 93% because we did a second set of hires from the list. So it was strictly based on performance on the written, with the top score being invited.
Does do we do anything to help prepare the candidates before the written, or are they just on their own before they show up?
Yeah, so the district doesn't do anything to prepare for the candidates for the written. The written that we used for this time, and I think maybe I might have shared this with the board, is we used the statewide eligibility list, which is through FCTC. And there's approximately over 130 agencies that use this same list and the same testing process for their firefighter hires. And so it's not our test to prepare, but I don't know if FCTC gives out any sort of practice exams for applicants. They did validate the test. The last validation was done in 2019. They look at each question. They look at the demographics of the people that took the test exam to determine if there's any adverse impact, and they removed approximately, I think, greater than 20 questions because there was adverse impact that was identified. And they want to kind of normalize the test so that there isn't, so you're not excluding any protected class or based on gender. So they did go through that norming process. But yeah, to answer your question, the district didn't submit or didn't prepare the candidates for the exam. But I'm not sure because it was not our exam if FCTC provides any assistance.
So just a couple quick quick questions. Is it possible then that these top tier candidates are getting offers from multiple agencies?
Yes, it is.
Okay. And then do we know do different agencies have different cutoffs for those that go from the written and then are accepted onto the interview?
Yeah.
panels?
Yeah, so they can use different, depending upon their need. I know some agencies that will only hire paramedics and won't look at EMTs. And some will look at both, but they will set based on what their need are, how big the agency is and how many open positions they have. They can set the number that they want to invite to the next phase, which would be the oral. So they could set it based on a score of 80 or above or 95 or above. But yeah, they set it, each agency would set their own.
Okay, thank you.
Could I follow up also? Just, you said you didn't know if there were practice tests, but you earlier said something about that there was some sort of sample questions or something.
So it was basically the sample test that was used to validate and ensure that there wasn't any adverse impact. So it was given to, it wasn't the exact test, but there was given to a certain population. I think it was 100 questions, and they tested applicants from each of the groups, women, maybe African-American, Asian, each of the groups they tested. And then they basically looked at each question to determine if there was any adverse impact based on that question. And if there was adverse impact, they removed the question. So there was a sample that was used to validate the test, but that sample isn't shared with applicants. That was used for test validation purposes.
Okay, but are you aware if there are any companies that actually offer preparation services?
At prior agencies, we used a company called CPS for written exams. Sometimes they would have, depending upon the test, and if it was a kind of a more common test, they would have practice tests or practice guides to help applicants, prepare for the exam. So that, yeah, I think that does exist. I don't know if it's for all positions, but we have seen it for some positions.
And so
If I could just weigh in real quickly to answer your question, Director, I was just happy to look at the FCT's website. They actually have an online preparation course for candidates that are taking the test. It's a 25-page study guide. And it looks like they're also preparing to offer in-person classes to help individuals too. So it sounds like it was, something that maybe was missing and they're working on it. But FCTC, the actual company, has a study guide.
okay. The other question I had was, is there any limit or rules about how often you could take the test?
So if we were to give, as the district, our own test, we don't have any rules how often someone can take a test. With FCTC, this is the first time I've ever used them, is when I started with the district. I don't know if they have rules how often someone can take the test, but the district doesn't have any rules.
But they don't have to take it, if they're applying for 4 agencies, they don't have to.
Oh yeah,
take
no,
their test.
they wouldn't have to take 4 tests. As long as all the agencies are on, except the statewide eligibility list. Some agencies don't, they do their own test, in which case the applicant would have to take maybe a multiple test. But if all of the agencies accept the statewide eligibility test, then they would take one test.
And just one last question. Are you able to generalize what the test tests?
Sure. So the areas that the test covers, there's a mathematical section. There's a section for technical information and problem solving, observing and recalling events, memorizing the placement of location and objects, learning and recalling visual information, communicating and writing, communicating orally, and then basic mechanical information. Those are the testing components for the knowledge, skills, and abilities.
Okay, thank you.
And just one other thing with that, Director Bernstein, is not all of those are equally weighted. So they're, the criticality is weighted and how important it is. And then there's a percentage assigned to that, and then that percentage is assessed for that component in the test.
So just when you talked about the validation, the last section you talked about was something mechanical. What were the words you used?
It's basic mechanical information.
So do I assume, since this was validated, that wouldn't differentiate men versus women?
That's correct. That's correct. So, so any question that adversely impacted any group, whether it be based on ethnicity or race or gender, was removed from the exam.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, Director Jones, do you want to describe your equity tree?
Yes. What you see on the screen is a chart, is a graph that was put together. 2 weeks ago, I went to a workshop that was a virtual workshop put on by FEMA. It was talking about equity during a disaster. And this chart was one of the charts the workshop spoke about in terms of understanding inequalities that goes on. And if you notice there, this particular chart or cartoon drawing represent systems of various sorts. It can be the fire district, it can be school district, it can be corporate America. Whenever there's inequality that happen, as the diagram shows on the left, upper left, it's pretty much focusing on unequal access to opportunities. And if you notice the tree, the apple is falling on one side of the tree because the tree is leaning over towards the person that's on the left. And the other person is wondering, why aren't the apple falling on my side? In some places, some companies, institutions, there's always the idea that we want to try to make this an equal, have equality going through our system. And what I found humorous with this particular chart was that equality came into play. There was evenly distribution of tools and assistance. If you notice, both of the cartoons, they both have a ladder, and they also got a bag to put the apples in. But if you notice on one side that even though the ladders are the same, it still shows that the person on the right is something is missing in this equality. And I'm sure you can probably see what that is. But if you drop down to the chart below, the cartoon below, it talk about equity. And I think that's part of what many institutions like try to bring when they see certain things that are not equal, trying to make the situation, bring it to parity, each one. And this, the net lower chart on equity, the situation has been identified where both have a ladder. The person on the right has a taller ladder. They are able then to really be able to pluck the apples on their side, whereas the other person on the left, nothing changed. They're still able to make it. All the tool that was introduced was a taller ladder for the person. However, when you start looking at the last chart on the lower left, you're talking about bringing justice to the system. And I'm sure you can probably see where justice is actually brought to make a system to offer equal access to both tools and opportunity. If you notice the justice chart figure, it shows they have an equal, the ladders are the same. Both persons are able to reach the apple on the tree. But the interesting part of that, there is the justice that came into play is where now the system, the tree, has been straightened up. It's no longer leaning from one side to another. The system that we have been introducing to the board, or the information that we have brought to the board over the last several months, would lead us to now the DEI ad hoc committee is to take this understanding and they begin to explore within the institution itself, where are the shortfalls? Is it the tools that we are using? Does it need tweaking of some sort? Just exactly what do we need to do? And I think part of what I brought to the board last month, to kind of help us get approval from the board to move forward. As you know, the committee, a part of its work in charge was to first get the committee, the purpose statements of what we was trying to do, clarified and with the board so that we have a clear mission and clear direction. The next step, the thing that we did for the board was in April, we came to the board and introduced the diversity, equity, and inclusion metrics. That metric will look at areas of hiring, representation within a district, retention, advancement. I think everybody had a couple opportunities to look at that particular chart, and we discussed it. And the equity indicator was the last thing last month that we had talked about that we brought before you. Those equity indicators were areas where we wanted to begin to collect data, to begin to look more in depth as to what we really wanted to try to accomplish in terms of searching out certain information around. There's 5, 6 different areas that we wanted to kind of explore to try to understand how we can begin to get that band out of the tree and stand it up so that it create justice and equity for everyone. So last month we also came to you, and this I'm rolling over into item number 8, that talking about this. But I think it's important, and we sent you, Michelle sent you the areas in which we wanted the board to approve so that we can take this thing to the next step. So the ultimate goal is to come back to the board with, after we have done the exploration, after we have looked at the different areas, equity indicator, with the information, and then begin to formulate a plan, a strategic plan that would have increase in those areas where the board may be lacking and figure out ways in which would best be able to suit our district in terms of the people that's in our district, that compose of our district, across the board. And I think everyone received those 4 areas that we needed your approval on. And I just want to take a few minutes to go through that, if that's appropriate at this point in time. So if it is, the first area, we went through and sent this to you so that you can kind of look it over, give us feedback, add to or take away from whatever is there. The first action item that we would like the board to approve tonight is that the board of directors by majority vote approve the equity indicators. Those were the data collection points, areas that we want to collect data on. And the second area we wanted the board to approve is the DEI metric focus area. And that was the first chart back in April that I brought before you that shows all of the broader areas that we as a committee thought was important to pursue. The third area really focusing on things that we can do immediately, things that can improve our diversity within our district right now, is to begin to offer DEI training, as well as again look at more of our practices and policies, and try to remove those barriers that may be a stumbling block for some people, some folks. And the last area has to do with giving authorization to begin to contract out some of this work to a DEI professional consultant to help us look at the information, design whatever we need to design in order to collect the data that we need to collect in order to eventually put together a strategic plan and bring back to the board of improving the district overall justice in this area of equity, diversity, equity, and inclusion. So those are the 4 areas that we would like the board to give us approval on so that we can take the next step. So I just want to leave it there. And we would love to
I have a comment.
And Virginia has a comment. Thank you, Virginia.
Yeah, no, thank you, Robert, for putting this, for, being a big part of what we've been doing. But I also want to, thank Francine and the chief also for, getting the information that we need and that we asked for, and helping us think through a lot of the issues surrounding DEI and also the HR issues, right? But I want everyone to know that, the information that Robert presented tonight is a lot of information that has been synthesized. Robert, you did a great job. Thank you. And Francine as well, in helping to get this information. But I want y'all to know that it's not like we weren't asking questions. We were not just moving things forward just because it's a DEI thing. Robert and I and Francine and the chief were asking pretty hard questions and having, pretty intense discussions too, knowing that the fire service in general has, a different culture that, might need to be looked at. And it is what it is, but at least we're taking the first step in moving, this DEI issue forward. And, I think we can be the leaders of that, especially with the diverse communities that we serve. I think it's really important for us to be looking at this. So I just want to thank Francine and the chief for really being there by our side and having the, pretty tough discussions sometimes. So thank you. And Robert, thanks for being our fearless leader on this committee. It's been actually a great experience. It's just, I'm glad we're having the discussion at least, right? So thank you.
Thank you, Virginia, for being here in the committee and adding valuable information. I think it has been a long road. And I think with the edge of the foot of the mountain, we have a lot more hills to climb before we can actually bring back to the board what we have, more that we have uncovered. And Francine had done a yeoman job in terms of being able to kind of give you the tip of the iceberg data. And that's all it is data for information. And the reflection of that data and what can be done with the data, both Jim and Chuck kind of alluded to certain areas that possibly, as well as Rob mentioned about the psychological exam. I mean, a lot of that goes into, you can screen people out. There's always tools out there to screen people out, but are there tools to screen people in? Not a handout, but a hand up, not just something giving a person a taller ladder, but being able to assure that what the state did was kind of look at the test and try to modify the test based on its biases, built-in biases that the average, some people may not. So we don't know what else is built into our structure, and that's why we need to get that tree, prop that tree up. But we can't prop it up until we understand and know what we need to slice out and what we need to add to. So that's where the board approval on these items so that we can move forward starting tomorrow to begin to get to the end of that journey. So whether I'm there at the end, who knows what tomorrow brings, but at least the structure would be there that would get us to that end.
Robert, I just have a quick question because I wasn't sure I understood what you said. Did you say that Francine has a lot more information that she hasn't presented yet?
No, I didn't say that. I said Francine has provided information that she have, but there are probably more information. If you go back and look at the metrics, she just touched upon one area of the metrics that we wanted to explore. And so that's, with that, in order to get to that end or get into it more, that's where the added help needs to come into play in terms of hiring another consultant, to a specialist in this area to come in to work with Francine and the chief, so that we can be able to dig this information out. And you know, there are a lot of good things that this district is doing. We won't, that's not to be taken away from that, is that the tree is still leaning and we need to straighten the tree out. But we need to understand the system of how to do that. And the only way we're gonna be able to do that is we gotta have information.
And can I just add one quick thing, Chuck, is that the information that we're getting, and I know Rob has his hand up, but I want everyone to know that, and I know Robert feels the same way, is that we're not compromising the quality of the people that we're looking at, because we know that our community and our district expects, you know, high quality response and high caliber employees. So, you know, but I do think that this information is very enlightening.
Okay, Rob, go ahead, please.
You're muted, Rob. Rob, you're muted.
You're muted, Rob.
Thank you. Chuck had brought up that we don't have all the information relative to the, well, you know, let's look at the organization. So I remember that numerous times asked the district to go into the group. They have a program where they have sheriff's office where they recruit people and they train them and they prepare them for testing. It's a boot camp program. And, you know, we don't have anything like that, do we, Chief?
No, other than our cadet program, for giving some people some exposure, we don't have a test preparation program.
Right, so they're not put through what the sheriff's office does, they put it through like a physical agility and they help them with the physical agility and they help them with the writing sample, that type of stuff. We don't have anything like that.
I don't think Chief heard you, Rob. You might have to bring your microphone down to you.
Yeah, Rob, you're a little muffled. Can you hear us?
You gotta get the microphone down. There you go.
Okay,
I
maybe
did
that'll
not
be
hear
better.
whatever
Yeah,
your
that's
last
better.
question.
Oh, I was
Yeah.
asking if we do have some type of a program where, let's say there's a physical agility part, there's a written part, there's some type of testing where we as an agency help them with to pass the test. And a lot of law enforcement agencies do it. I was just wondering if we do anything like that.
Don't, unless somebody has exposure, like I said, if they happen to have a friend or family member, or they're part of our cadet program, we don't have a formal program. That being said, we could very easily initiate something like that and allow for some test prep, have people come work out with their local firefighters and get the right skill sets for that. We can teach and train people how to go through the interview process too. So that it levels the playing field for everybody. And we can put a lot of that stuff online for those that aren't in the area, but that are interested in working for our agency. There's a way where we can create a lot of access and, like I said, level the playing field for everybody.
That's what I got a little bit out of, Robert's presentation. And thanks, Robert, for putting all that work together on this. And I saw a little bit of that, bending that tree a little bit to give everybody a good chance, and I remember being involved in law enforcement training where we did have a program where we helped not only recruit people, but we got them to the level where they could pass the physical agility and the written tests and that type of stuff. So I'd like to see some of that happen a little bit, Robert, kind of bend that tree a little bit like you're talking about and bring people in. And I know with our training function, we only have, I think, 2 people in our training function that actually could help with that, but it's a huge program. I'm pretty sure the sheriff office has quite a bit of personnel involved in it, but that would be something that I would like to see, Chief, that if someone is interested in a career as a firefighter, I know we have the cadet program, but let's get them over the finish line and bend that tree a little bit so we can help them out with that. So.
And I think it starts at a grassroots level too, Rob.
Yes.
It starts at the
Yeah, at that
grassroots
community level.
and then build to get to where you're talking about, where the district can highlight itself in terms of what it can do. Because I think it's going to take a lot more than the Menlo Park Fire Protection District. It's going to take the communities and it's going to take other institutions as well, connected into it. Like Francine mentioned about the state, they administer a test. People somehow find out about this program at the state, and somehow they paid to go. And I saw too that they have a few little scholarships at the state for people, but maybe we may need, if we find people of interest that we know that likely candidates, maybe we might pay the $25 whatever it is to do. So there's many different possibilities. And I think given the okay, your approval on the next action items will give us the start, the tools to move in that direction.
Yeah.
You have your hand up. Go ahead.
Me?
Yes, or you have your
Yeah,
hand.
so Chief, just a quick question, in Ventura County, did y'all look at this or like even in other, maybe Southern California departments that
Yeah.
really do have diverse communities down there, like we do, but bigger?
Sure. I mean, all of these things that we've discussed, we looked at and practiced. And part of it, probably the most significant thing we did was just we cast a wider net. And we didn't lower the standards. We just, when you cast a wider net, you can do a lot of things. And a lot of times a written test score is not the only indicator of who a successful firefighter will be. There's so many intangibles that you're not going to get with somebody who's a really great test taker or who's taken the test 20 times, and just kind of fine tuned it. We want to, like I said, we want to level that playing field so the person that's taking it for their first time has equal opportunity for somebody who's taken it 20 times. And there's lots of things we can do in advance to help prepare people for it. And, but yes, so we did a lot of things, and we even had a girls' fire camp. And, that everyone was invited to, but we called it Girls Fire Camp. And it was run by volunteer professional female firefighters throughout the state. They kind of go around and do the circuit to introduce young women to a career in the fire service. Lots of really interesting things that can be done, like I said, just to cast a wider net. And like Director Jones, I almost called you Dr. Jones, was talking about with, it's not a handout, it's a handout, right? Okay. And it's just kind of, it's providing people with the opportunity that didn't realize that they had it. So.
Chief, I wanted to ask about the test because it effectively we've made the test 100% of the criterion. I mean, the test is the criterion, the end. And I was curious about, I don't know how familiar you are with the test. We used to talk about two kinds of tests. There was what we called a kind of like a hurdle test where all you needed to do is get a certain score and you were qualified, but getting a higher score didn't matter. And then there was the selection kind of test where the highest score would be the best somehow. Is there any indication that the best score on this is the best candidate? Or is there some minimum score they look at? Or how does this scoring work?
Yeah, it's up to us. And I'm familiar with the test. We gave a similar test in Ventura County, but instead of participating in a statewide pool, we purchased the test from the company and gave the test, and then we had our own list, so nobody could steal our candidates from it. And then what we did is our minimum passing score was 70 or above, and what that did was cause a very large pool of candidates that we needed to interview. So we had, I think ultimately, when you look at the group of people that we hired, they were probably all over that range of between 70 and 100. And so what the test does is it establishes the minimum criteria in order to get an oral interview. And then in the oral interview, you get to measure those intangible things, people's ability to get along with others, to demonstrate compassion, and, some kind of a team environment and things like that. And then also along that route, we put together some videos to allow people to see what the proper interview looks like, because it's very different than an office environment interview that you may have participated in as you were, wanting to enter a professional field. So, so many different things that we can do. Like I said, to level the playing field, the test is very basic. You're asking about the mechanical portions. It's common sense things. Both FCTC and NTN, the organization we use, have validated all those things and removed portions of the test that, have adverse impacts. But it's like in the mechanical thing. It's a simple thing where they'll have three, intertwined gears, and gear A, B, and C will be different sizes. And we'll say if gear A is rotating counterclockwise, is gear C going counterclockwise or clockwise and faster or slower than gear A, right? So it's kind of common sense stuff, but it makes you have to think things through. So there's things like this. It's an entry level test. we're not hiring people that are already professional firefighters. We're trying to hire people that have good character, have great work ethic, have, compassionate or beyond all compare kind of thing. And will treat our community members like they would treat their own parents or grandparents. So.
And just out of curiosity, is there only, when you're looking at the test score, is there only one track that you're looking at, like firefighter the end? Or are you looking at, for example, who might be a more compassionate paramedic versus who might be a stronger firefighter or something of that sort?
Are you asking about the written exam? I mean,
yeah,
I don't know. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that there are both of those tests that I referenced have video-based scenarios that ask you questions for the best answer. There's not a necessarily right answer, and a lot of it has to do with human interaction. What would you do in this situation? And part of that is trying to help us measure some of those intangible things that are important to us. Compassionate care. How do you deal with conflict? Things like that are all important in the jobs we do. So, but differentiating between a firefighter and an EMT or a paramedic, not so much in those tests.
What was a little surprising or discouraging in some ways in Francine's presentation was that out of the female candidates who passed the test, we didn't interview one of them, if I'm correct about my recollection.
That's accurate.
And I'm just not sure that having the best score is the best criterion, yet somehow, somewhere, someone made the decision that that was the one criterion, was the best scores.
And that's the challenge when we're trying to have a manageable, number of interviews that we conduct in person. It's trying to figure out what how do you figure that out? Because we could have had, if we had lowered our score to 80, we could have tripled the numbers of candidates we had to interview, but we might have captured 70% of the women in there. Who knows? And that's one of those things we'll have to work on. It'd be great to have the support of the board for us. Yeah, these efforts will certainly cost us a little bit more money in the in the recruitment process, but I think it's money well spent when you look at ultimately we'll have a really inclusive workforce that's going to be probably a little bit more reflective of the communities we protect. And like I said, money well spent.
I'm not sure that the interview is necessarily the best criterion either. I mean, well, I say that because what do we want? People who are good talkers and nice guys, and what are we looking for when we interview someone? And I don't know the answer to that. Maybe it's a kind of a combination or portfolio of a number of those skills. What's a slippery slope here, and don't misunderstand me, I'm not arguing for this, but if you think there's only one criterion and it's the score, the minute we lower the scores to get in, we've lowered our standards. Now, I don't think that the score is a good standard, but that's the only standard we have, and we would be lowering it. And so it's hard to make that argument that we're not lowering standards when in fact we would be. I think what we need is more standards, and that's what we don't have right now.
Chuck?
Yeah, go ahead, Robert.
Two things. If you reflect back to the apple tree, it's not about lowering the standard, and that lowering the standards or providing this quota number goes back to 64 when affirmative action came into play. People were saying, oh, you're lowering the standard for people to get in, folks of color, to get into to companies in a position. And it's not about lowering the standards, because you have folks of color graduate out of Harvard, Yale, Stanford, UCLA, in economics, in business, and they are just as qualified, but somehow the screening in process is not equitable. And so I think that's where we need to get to. Is I don't think I heard maybe I do it. My hearing do get lost. It's taking place these days, but I'm not hearing about lowering the standards. It's about understanding what will it take for us as a district, if we decide that that's what we find a challenge and important for us to do at the district, is to create opportunities, create the tools necessary to level the playing field, straightening up the tree. So the only way we can really get to that point, and maybe we might uncover other areas besides scoring that may need to be tweaked in different areas to keep the same scoring, but how do you prepare people to get to the scores? Because some people, like we talked about earlier, are good test takers. Some people are good talkers, but they're not good test takers. They may be very physically fit, and they may be able to run up a ladder in 2 minutes or less, but others may not. So how do you, the tools that we use to evaluate who are the candidates and what is the system that's going to be as inclusive as possible? And I think that's where, if the board allow us to these action items to move forward, we will be bringing back to you every step of the stage of the game, step of the way of what we uncover to get the board approval, so that we can then either accept that as a standard or need to go back and modify it a little bit more. But we need to a motion to move forward on this, our action items, in order to take that first step. So,
Jim, go ahead, please.
Yeah, apparently the hand raise function on my system's not working on this end. A few comments and a question. The analysis that Francine shared with us, certainly a cause for concern for me. The number that are passing the test, and then the number that are passing the test and then advancing to interviews, and how was that system created? How did it come to be? I don't know. And I'm concerned that we aren't doing coaching or preparation for those that are interested. Robert, if I have a problem here, it's the 4 proposals that you presented to us. I'm not sure they get us to where we want to be. I mean, listening to the discussion here, I think there's a broad consensus that our hiring system needs careful evaluation. If there are artificial barriers that have been put in place, that those be eliminated. I don't hear anybody advocating anything to the contrary. I'm uncertain of the need for a consultant. I think your proposals, as I recall them, address both the hiring and then the promotion of individuals, our delivery of programs to the communities we serve, and even purchasing. And I just feel like I feel like we should choose one area, and I think this hiring, especially at the entry level, deserves our full attention. I, for one, have full confidence in the chief and Francine, one, to examine our system, and then present us with recommendations on why it's not performing well, or how it should be changed to be more inclusive, to borrow the chief's phrase, to throw a wider net out, and again, eliminate any artificial barriers that may be there. If we've set the pass rate at 96%, again, there's been a lot of discussion. That's just one criteria, and maybe we lower it to 70% and just a simple pass fail. And then if it means that we interview more people, then so be it. We'll bear that cost. But I have confidence in the chief and Francine in performing that analysis, making the recommendations, And maybe those recommendations include additional staff, maybe they include, some kind of a consultant, but I for one, am reluctant to just say, yeah, we need to go hire a DEI consultant without really having a clear sense of what the issues are and what that consultant would do for us. So Robert, I guess my question to you is what do you think the value added would be from a consultant? What would that consultant give us?
The way I look at it, Jim, I think if you're in the game, you're on the basketball court, you one of the players, you're in the game, you're only seeing what the game is bringing before you. That's why they have a coach, to be able to, and assistance to the coach, to be able to see what the players in the game are not doing or should be doing, what tweaks, if they go about tweaking what they do in the game, will create a different result. So all we are saying with the work that we have done so far was identify the areas. And if you look at the metrics that we have put together, it covers a wide range of areas. So what we don't know are the questions that were put together in the on the data charts, the data that we want to try to capture, and that covers every area of within the district, within this process that we call Miller Park Fire Protection District, to see where the tree is leaning. And I wish I had all of the expertise, but I have some. And I think what we need to fill in the gaps is a person, like we just talked about, this consultant that we just has been in closed session, going out, trying to find information about certain things that we didn't know as a board. It's the same, in the same form or fashion, that we think we may know, but we in the game. We need someone else to come in to validate that and help us find solutions. I mean, the chief, yeah, he got experience in where he's at. He can bring that to the plate. We interviewed, no offense, chief, we interviewed other fire chief before we hired the one we got, who had experience in their own program of diversity, equity, and inclusion. It was just one aspect of it. So if we don't know what, it's all like trying to understand what we need to fix, and we don't have the information. We had some information today from Francine. We need to find out are there other areas? And I think that's where the team, right now, the DEI ad hoc committee team, Virginia, myself, with the aid of the chief and Francine, to begin to dig deeper and to get a broader understanding of what the magnitude of what we're talking about here. So I don't know if that answered the question, but I just look at it as being, we're in the game, we're the players, but we also need the coach that guide us in directions that we need to go.
Virginia, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm going to echo Robert's sentiments as well, and add that, if you look at the people who are actually looking at the data, I mean, it's not as, Robert and I are diverse, and we certainly got the data from Francine, which I think is a great starting point. But in terms of coaching and guiding us, I think that we may need a different voice to kind of to look at things that we might not see, right? Just because of where we are in our positions and, our backgrounds, our race, all of that. So I don't know. I mean, we've hired consultants on for so many different things over the last couple years. And I think in terms of diversifying our workforce, to make sure that they represent our community, I mean, I think that this would be money well spent for us to look at what we might need to do to make a 21st century workforce, exist, even within today's confines. So, meaning, I don't know if the group, like within, it's not a knock on Francine and the chief, but I think getting a different perspective, maybe a more neutral perspective, or a perspective that gives us a different viewpoint is important.
Oh, go ahead, Rob. You're muted.
Yeah, I know. Thank you, Chuck. I see, I had posed a few questions to the chief involving the aspect of recruitment, because I think that would, as far as I'm concerned, that would be probably one of the areas that I would really want to focus on under recruitment. Just looking at our workforce numbers and the type of individuals that are represented by our community, you can see that we do have some issues in that. And the chief and Francine have pretty good strategies relative to change that. I mean, the chief's only been here for a short time. He had programs in Ventura County that I'm sure they were working. But we have a target group or a target population that we get plenty of applicants, it appears, right, Francine? Would you say we had 600 or something, right? I mean, it's not like law enforcement where they're not really getting the individuals interested in doing the job. I mean, we're getting a whole bunch of applicants here. And as Jim said, maybe we need to lower, instead of making that test score 90, maybe we do lower it to maybe 70 or a pass fail, so we can reach down to the bottom, to that 70 grade, and give them an opportunity to interview, to do the physical agility, to prove themselves worthy of a position as a firefighter without being the great test taker, as you said, Robert. Maybe that's what we have to do, but I don't think we're at this junction here where we're in trouble. I mean, it appears that, if we didn't have a competent staff or a competent HR manager and we had huge issues and no ideas and everything, but I'm seeing that there's a lot of open-mindedness here between, Francine and the chief. And we have a small training unit. And I don't know if that would, chief, that's up to the chief operationally of how many people he wants to assign to that. Does he want to set that up as a boot camp like some of these law enforcement agencies do? It's totally operationally up to him. But before we bring in a consultant, I would like to give our staff a chance to bring up these recruitment numbers. So that's all I have. Thank you, Chuck.
Okay, I'd like to add something that's a slightly off from that, and it's not disagreeing with it, but I feel that we're in an area now that is potentially, well, we could get some sort of backlash or something. I'd like the chief to bring up some of these things with his staff, maybe all the staff or the upper level, the chief officers or something, and get some feedback on it about what we're doing and so forth. I have long thought, for example, and nobody's talking about this, but I've long thought that we could, if we changed our service models in some ways, we could change these things immediately and provide better service in our district. And the idea, for example, of having a paramedic force only, not combined paramedic firefighter, not for everything, but to have a rapid response paramedic force where the ability to pull, 200 pounds of hose up a 100-foot ladder wasn't the criterion for being a good performer. And I know the chief, actually, one of the things that impressed me in the interview process with the chief is that he actually tried some of these alternative staffing models so that we ended up having greater numbers of people on duty during the peak hours, rush hour, during the daytime, rather than having them overnight. And that allowed more women to be interested. It allowed people who wanted to be home at night to be interested. So there's a whole bunch of things that may be threatening to some people, or maybe something where we think that it's out of bounds and we don't want to get into. But I think we should have some idea, and we ought to give the staff a chance to react to some of this stuff. For all I know, everybody might get on board and say, yeah, let's go forward. But we also might have a reaction. I think we ought to understand the landscape a little bit. What I would recommend is that we hold off on any action for a month. We have the chief talk to staff, bring this up at staff meetings, and that we refer the whole subject matter to, in addition to this DEI ad hoc committee, to also the HR committee to see if anybody from the public would like to weigh in on this. And then a month from now, we go forward with a plan of action where we've at least have a chance to get some feedback from our constituents, our employees, and so forth. So anyway, that would be my recommendation. I see two hands here. Robert, I'll go to you first, and then Rob second.
I want to remind the board, our first commitment we asked you to commit to for this committee. And that was, we gave you a purpose statement. Whether you read it or not, I have no idea. But what it did say, it said the purpose statements for the committee was to examine the diversity, equity, and inclusion framework, which is the basic structure underlying Menlo Park Fire Protection District success in recruiting, retaining, and advancing the best talent in an environment which promote and encourage diversity, equity, and inclusion. Also, to examine the strengths and weaknesses of the Menlo Park Fire Protection District structure and make recommendations that would empower leaders to better understand and manage the district's most valuable assets, its people and their talents. In addition, the DEI ad hoc committee will also work with the fire chief and the district staff to develop strategies that support best practices in the realm of equity, inclusion, diversity for consideration and approval by the board. By not allowing us to go forward on a commitment that we asked the board to approve, that what you're saying is that, one, you don't believe in what we just got to tell you over the last 6 months, the information that we have brought for you, that yes, we got a fantastic fire chief, we got a fantastic HR person. One, they have a tremendous amount of other work. Two, and there's no disparity on them, they are not expert like you or I are not expert in this area. And there are other areas. And if you have truly read the metrics points and the factors that we need to explore and the sub-factors that's underneath that, this was not taken lightly. This was not something that came out of my head only, but these are areas in which experts are saying on volumes of data that's out there that any institution need to explore and needs to be done without the shackles of a conformed mind. You know, we're trying to straighten out that tree, and you won't allow that tree to just straighten out because it's always going to be, let's let this other thing happen first and see how that works. It's always a let this other stuff straighten out. How do we straighten something out if we don't have any information on what we need to straighten out? And I know we want to pinch pennies now, but all these other consultant reports, the consultant that came through here over the last year and a half, we don't spend quite a bit of money on it. But here it is to try to work with human lives, to improve the quality and richness that this district already inherit by the people that live here, and trying to bring them inclusive into the system. And now we want to wait. Now we want to wait.
Okay, Rob?
Thanks, Chuck. You know, I hear what Robert's saying relative to bringing it to light the way him and Virginia have with their ad hoc.
On 1 second.
Uh,
Okay, Rob.
I hit
go
the
ahead.
wrong button. I'm trying to erase my hand. I'm sorry. There you go. I was trying to erase my hand, Chuck.
Okay, well, the recording stopped, but it's now back on, so go ahead.
Yeah. As I said, I understand that Robert and Virginia, you know, brought this to the limelight. They've both done a lot of work on this in order to bring it to the attention and to have a purpose relative to the fire district. I would like to, as I said before, target one area, and I figure recruitment would be an area that I would be very much interested in the beginning. And for the chief and his staff to prepare a game plan and a strategy with goals and objectives. Maybe the way we did it in the federal government, we established a task force committee for recruitment as to try to recruit more people, more minorities, more qualified individuals to apply for our agency. And I think it's a great idea to involve the chief and his staff, and maybe the chief could establish kind of a task force with his line people also and get some of their feedback, and then come back to us as a board and see what that strategy is. I think I'm sure with all the tasks that we put on the chief now and our HR manager, that I have utmost of confidence that they can prepare some type of a recruitment plan, bring it in front of the board and have us look at it. And if we don't like the recruitment plan, we can always go, Robert, in the direction that you want to and get a consultant in and maybe start first with recruitment and then next in other areas that that you've identified in your project. So yeah, I would just, before bringing in a consultant, and I'd like to give the chief and his staff and the organization a chance to make it good. So thank you, Chuck.
Okay, Virginia?
So the chief and Francine have been involved with this every step of the way. And I don't want to put words in anyone's mouth, but it seems that Robert and I have come to this conclusion of possibly needing a coach, as he put it, after months and months of meetings with the chief and our HR director. And that's why we are bringing this forth now. And so I have a question for the chief. Chief, where do you think we are, knowing that we've had these discussions for, I don't know, Robert, you said what, 5 or 6 months now? And it's not, in our meetings have been very, very fruitful, very substantive, sometimes very difficult. And I think that we've kind of come to the same conclusion that possibly hiring an outside coach would help us. And I mean, I'd like to hear what the chief has to say about that. But also, before you go on, Chief Chuck, I'm going to give you some kudos here because you put this committee together. And I think it's a very important committee. And I just want you to know that, at least for me, and I'm sure Robert feels this way, that we're appreciative that you've given us the opportunity, and the chief and Francine, our HR director, the opportunity to look at this important issue. So Chief, I don't know if you want me to repeat my question, but I think you probably got the question.
I certainly have the gist of it, and you can re-ask if I don't answer all the questions. So I will say right now, I mean, just after listening to the board, and I appreciate the constructive conversation that are having. Francine and I could very easily put together a comprehensive plan that would address the majority of the issues and solutions to them when it comes to our recruitment and outreach and how we test and hire. But I think there's some areas where we could use some help, and we even, whether the board gave specific direction or not, we have the ability to hire consultants and probably within our purchasing authority, et cetera. And in all likelihood, because Francine and I have been talking about some gaps we have in our training, and part of it is implicit bias, and some of it is some additional DEI training. And I wouldn't imagine that we would be doing this on our own. We'd be having a professional that has that perspective and has the knowledge to help us navigate those things. So, I mean, there's value in that. There may also be some value in having somebody look at our strategies that we put together to see if we're missing anything when it comes to our recruitment and hiring. It would be great to have the support of the board in some of those areas, but not necessarily, a requirement that ties our hands to hire a consultant that may or may not exist when it comes to some of these hiring strategies. But certainly to have that support from the board and the empowerment to go forth and do that. We kind of have that. And we've been hearing the conversation too. But like I said, I think we can address a lot of those things by putting together and sharing a plan. And then also, I think I'm beginning to repeat myself. So I don't know if that, Director Corrali, if that answered your questions, but those are just my general thoughts.
And yeah, no, thank you. And that may be a good place to start, Chief. I mean, we talked about this in the committee. I think that there are some things like you touched on, such as implicit bias, that we definitely, I think, would need help with. So thank you.
I want to add one more thing, and I can understand Robert's potential frustration with me being a little cautious about the consultant route also, because I've been a big advocate for consultants. And I think there's really two kinds of consultants here. And that a consultant is kind of a very broad word. I mean, there's the typical consultants the district's been hiring over the last year or so were people who did investigations, they looked at data, they looked at comparable organizations, they did research basically on various things. And I think if we felt we needed research on things, that a consultant would be important. I think if we felt we needed somebody, a facilitator, to conduct the training sessions, or even to conduct surveys of employees, or whatever it might be, that would be something certainly to do. But a coach kind of consultant is a different animal, it seems to me. A coach consultant is somebody who's there for the long term. They don't come in and just do a study and present the results and leave, which is mostly the kind of studies that I've been interested in. I think a coach is the kind of person who comes, and we'd be looking at 3 to 5 years or something like that. And I must say that at some point we had a consultant like that who was trying to help the board deal with its own internal processes and so forth. And I think to some extent it was helpful, but to some extent, I kind of felt a little manipulated by her. I felt like we were having to agree to things that I didn't really agree to. It just felt uncomfortable to me. So I'm not quite sure what we're talking about, a consultant. I think if I had a better idea of, do we need to do research on something, I would certainly support that. If to bring somebody who wants to make me feel guilty about something, I'm kind of less interested in that. So I just don't know what we're talking about. Certainly a training consultant, I think, would be a good idea. If we did, and I think this is lower priority, but if we wanted to look at our purchasing, for example, and see what kinds of policies we had about our purchasing, where somebody could really do something analytical, I would support that as well. But boy, I'll tell you, when we deal with our employees and our recruiting and our retention, that's such a big bite to take. I think we see some definite areas that we can get to work on right now. Francine and the chief seem to be targeting that. I think the board is supportive of that completely. I'd like us to get going on some of these things and actually start some action things right away. And I think it would be helpful to get the staff on board as well, which is why I was suggesting having the chief talk to his staff about some of these things. All you have to do is look at the data that Francine has presented, and you realize we've got some work to do.
Exactly.
And there's some solutions there. So I'm happy for the progress we're making. I can see some things that we ought to get to work on. And I'm certainly ready to get going on that. It's not, I don't see us stopping at all at this point. I see us getting going. So, Rob, I'm going to go to you and then to Robert.
I think Robert was first.
Oh,
Chuck.
I'm sorry. I didn't say. Go
I'll
ahead,
yield,
Robert.
I'll yield to Robert.
Go ahead, Robert. Sorry.
Point of clarification, I use the analogy of a coach to try to get you to out of the mindset or put you into the mind frame that when you are in the game, it's hard to see how the game is flowing when you're busy with the day-to-day activity. Having someone to come in, a consultant, you can call him coach, you can call him Joe, I don't care. Someone to be able to look at objectively the 7 different areas. And that's part of, I wish you'd take another look at the sheet that we put together for it around data collection, which covers a variety of different areas, 7 different areas within the district that impact what the nature of what we're talking about, diversity and equity. Inclusion, I'll leave that for another day. Maybe people don't want to deal with that. But diversity and equity is important. The data difference, the little data Francine gave you should open your eyes to where there is some concerns. Not to say the ship is sinking, but if the ship wants to be inclusive and the tree straighten up the tree, there are certain things that need to be looked at. And that's where you hire consultants to come in to help you facilitate that process. We just heard this guy during the closed session. It got hired to come in and look at data, to compare the data in one particular area. That was that person's expertise. They did not have an expertise in diversity and equity. But there are people out there, consultants that specialize in that particular area, to look at the data, the information we have generated so far, as Virginia mentioned earlier, that can give us, to let us know that there may be more, or that maybe we should look at some other areas or approach it in a different way, to get enough information so that we can then straighten up this tree as best we can. And so that's the rationale, I think, to hire any consultant, to give you a different perspective, to confirm through affirmation of what we're already doing, and to guide and lead us in other areas that we need to kind of focus on to get the results that we're looking for. And that's to me, the purpose of hiring a consultant to do it. I agree with, throughout the hiring all these other consultants, understanding that person is going to add resource where we don't have the resource and knowledge of. So I'm done with that. I'm actually done.
Okay, Rob, and then Virginia.
Thanks, Chuck. As the chief mentioned that he has a discretion to bring in, I don't know if you want to call them consultants, teachers, or to help the organization, maybe in the training realm or even in the recruitment realm. But those are the decisions that I feel comfortable with resting it on the chief and his staff to come up with. We need help in recruitment. We need help in diversity training, let's say. And I'm sure there are vendors that go out and put these classes on. So, I just don't want to take, as Chuck mentioned, have some consultant there hanging around forever. And, I can see these short-term things like maybe setting up a training program or helping in a recruitment process for the organization. But, once you latch on to some of these consultants, it's like a monkey on your back. And I don't want to restrict the chief and his staff. I want the chief and his staff to have that discretionary power to either bring in the help that they need or not. I think they'll know. They're both professionals. They'll know if they need the help in recruitment or in the training realm. So I just don't want to go outside the organization unless we really have to, but always keep that option of going outside the organization. Thank you, Chuck.
Okay, Virginia.
Yeah, I think the chief was pretty clear on, the possibility that, he might need help and he'll seek it if needed. But I also want to go back to what you said, Chuck, about the consultant and, kind of being that coach, as you put it in your definition. I think we have that, don't we, for the finance department right now, to kind of make sure that, we're doing what we need to do to keep our financials in order and our budget process in order, just because we might not know some things. I mean, we hired that person, or we gave approval to hire that person. And I don't see this as being any different from that. So thanks.
Okay. Okay, well, here we are. I think everybody's had a say here. I guess if somebody would like to make a motion or something, we can go there. Jim?
Yeah, I'll jump in. I propose that or I move that the chief and his staff be directed to prepare an evaluation of DEI issues confronting the district and present findings and recommendations to the board.
Okay, do I have a second for Jim's motion? Well, I'll second that. So we have a motion and a second. Discussion? Go ahead, Rob.
Yeah, Chuck, to add a little bit on to what Jim has stated, I think, we need to tackle one issue at a time. And that's why I identified the recruitment one. And trying to get some baseline here. So that's why I didn't second Jim's motion. I wanted it more, not to burden the chief with all these different problem areas, but to deal with one problem area and have him and his staff come up with some solutions to report to us as a board. And if he needs the assistance, as Virginia said, in the chief, to go outside and get some advice, consulted advice. So I think it's too broad of a motion to just to say diversity, inclusion. Yeah. So, thank you.
Chuck?
Yes, go ahead, Virginia.
So with regard to Jim's motion, I mean, do you want this information to come back to the board and then the DEI ad hoc committee's work is done right now? I mean, because I think that a lot of the information that we've gotten, I mean, I was hoping it would answer some questions. Where do you think the DEI ad hoc committee fits in now with regard to your motion, Jim?
The DEI committees would still play a role in evaluating whatever findings and recommendations the chief came forward with. I think it would still have value in evaluating, the study, the report, and I'd keep it in place. Or I would recommend to Chuck that he keep it in place. It's his discretion.
Yeah, let me respond also. I don't think the work is done by any means. I mean, I would like to keep it going. I think it seems like it's been a productive relationship to have the two members of the task force of the ad hoc committee meeting with Francine and the chief. I think that's been a productive collaboration. I'd certainly like to see that happen. And I would even propose at some point that at least starting with dealing with this in our recruiting, hiring, and retention become a strategic goal for this for our board. And at this point, it's not a strategic goal, but we're certainly putting a lot of time in it. We're acting as if it's a strategic goal. And at some point, we might want to formalize that. We haven't really focused on goals this year, but that clearly is a goal for us. And for me too, I think we've made lots of progress in a relatively few months. So I'm very pleased about where we're going on this. Jim?
Chuck, with consideration to Rob's comments, I'm willing to amend my motion to add emphasis to recruitment and hiring as it relates to DEI issues. I agree. I think that's where we have a clear need, and I'd like to see us move swiftly in this area.
Well, and I will, as the seconder of the motion, I'll agree with that and add that in addition, I really want us to do everything we can to improve our local hiring. One, to reflect the community, and two, to make sure that the people we rely on in a disaster live nearby. So yeah, that's something that I would like to see also.
Huge point. Good point, Chuck.
Any other discussion then on the motion?
If Michelle can read it back for us, that'd be great, Chuck.
I think Stephen Miller had a comment.
I was going to request that you read back the motion because as amended, it's perhaps not entirely clear to everybody. So thank you to Director Solano for anticipating my comment.
Okay,
Thank you,
so
Steve.
I have the motion as the chief and staff to evaluate DEI issues confronting the district with an emphasis on recruitment and hiring and bringing the findings and recommendations to the board.
Director Bernstein, if I could just offer a few comments before you take a vote. First of all, again, thank you, especially to Directors Jones and Corrali for a lot of the work that went on behind the scenes. This is really a great step for us to take, and it is going to be something that Francine and I and the board and our whole district will be working on long after we're all gone, I'm sure. So this is a really great first steps. We probably will get some help in some of these areas that we have. And then again, especially for, I know Director Bernstein, you brought up just concerns about, it's a cultural change when we start talking about these things. And the one thing that I dealt with in the past when we began really doing a lot of recruitment and outreach was just that same guarantee to the employees that work with us currently into our community is that we will never lower our standards, and everybody that pins a Menlo Park Fire District badge on their chest will be fully qualified as a firefighter. So, and I ran an academy that had 46% was female, which was unheard of, and it was really caused a lot of concerns. But it was that same kind of thing that every single person that walks into that academy has the same rigorous standards that we've always had, and will have to perform all of them before they graduate. So I think that's really what people want to know most, is that we're going to still hold the same high standards that the Menlo Park Fire District has always held, and that we'll have just incredibly wonderful firefighters that we recruit and retain as a result. So thank you to the board for tonight's discussion, really productive, and it's a step in the right direction.
Okay, any further discussion before we vote? I'm going to ask if anybody from the public would like to weigh in on this matter.
Yes, if anyone has a public comment, please use the raise hand feature or press *9 if you called in. Last call for public comment. And seeing none, Director Bernstein, you may continue.
Okay, I'd like to ask you then, please, to proceed with the roll call vote.
Director Jones,
Aye.
Director Crawley,
Aye.
Director McLaughlin,
Aye.
Director Solano,
Aye.
Director Bernstein.
Aye. The motion carries 5-0. And Robert, do I assume we started actually with item 7, which was Francine's presentation? It kind of morphed into item 8, which was your next steps. Did you have more next steps you wanted to talk about at this point, or was that your item?
That was my item, but I do have one more thing I want to say, if I may.
Please.
As of this moment, please accept my resignation from the DEI Ad Hoc Committee. It's been a pleasure. Thank you for nominating me to head this group, but at this point, I think it's probably more effective that I step away from that. Thank you.
Well, Robert, I certainly hear what you say, and I don't want to ignore what you said, but I am going to defer any acceptance of that until we can talk at a later point after tonight. So I plan to talk to you about this before I accept that.
Well, I'm giving you my resignation, so from the committee.
Okay, I'm going to move then to item number 9, to discuss the district program assignments. Is that you, Chief?
This is mine. And this is somewhat of a continuing item. It kind of came up during our budget hearings, the preliminary budget review and then the final budget, and just an ongoing question related to overtime, especially as it relates to our battalion chiefs. And so this came out of a committee and some questions were asked, and I was asked to follow up and report to the board on 4 general questions as it relates to all of the, I'll call them collateral assignments for our battalion chiefs. So this is what the report basically discusses. I won't spend a lot of time talking about it because I'll open it up for questions, but just in general, the question was asked about how assignments are made. They've been made historically through the deputy fire chief. The current assignments that are attached in attachment A there were all made by Chief Schaefer when he was the deputy chief. Chief Chappell-Human was still the fire chief. As far as the question was asked as to whether the battalion chiefs are evaluated on their performance in managing their programs, whether or not they have historically, I can't say, but I do know that Chief Coyle has used their performance with all 6 of the BCs in their most recent evaluations. That was done even before the question was asked. So currently they are being evaluated in that. Program manager oversight and overtime approval within their program, as I delineated in the report, was somewhat inconsistent. Really exceptionally well managed in the training division, well tracked, and then inconsistently done by some of the program managers. And this is, as the questions are asked and we turn over a stone, we find sometimes we have some room for improvement. So already, as just a result of the question, Chief Coyle has sent out an IM to all of the department, just giving them specific instructions on approvals. So those approvals should all be in place from somebody that's in a non-program manager assignment as one of the coordinators. Now all of their overtime absolutely will be approved by the program managers. And then the final question really was asking for an accounting of the overtime. And I chose the last fiscal year, for the battalion chiefs associated with program management overtime. And so, again, as you can see on item 4 in there, it is not very granular as far as our record keeping and how things have been posted. So, some of the overtime has been charged off the programs. I think a good chunk of it has been just posted generically to emergency operations, which doesn't give us a lot of clarity and transparency on the costs of our program management. So again, we can't go back and fix that. But this year, moving forward, as we were dealing with some of the challenges with our budget and our coding, we are working on having anyone that's working on a program that they specifically delineate that in either telestaff or on their ADP or in some other form so that we can track it. So that really is the end of my staff report, and I'm open for questions and comments.
Comments from the board? Robert, go ahead. Excuse me, Rob, go ahead.
Thank you, Chuck. Chief, thank you for answering all the questions that we posed to you at the HR committee. I'm satisfied. Thank you.
I have a question, Chief. The $535,000 or $536,000 that's here, how does that compare to the amount of overtime that is actually in these programs that are listed in attachment A, the total?
Well, I will say, I don't know how it compares, and there's not, when you look at when we had our program or our program overtime budgets that were approved, these numbers right here is overtime just as it relates to the battalion chiefs. So that doesn't include anything that a captain or a firefighter may have charged in overtime. So really what I had Long do was break out the total amount of overtime attributable to the battalion chiefs for the last fiscal year and what the source of that was. And so that's what it is. That, like I said, that was a little bit of the frustration is we didn't have the granularity in that. My guess is that we're missing some of the tracking. That I'm sure the overtime was charged, but it didn't get charged to the appropriate program.
Okay. Well, I'm going to reiterate, just to restate, why I was interested in this information. To me, it's inconsistent that battalion chiefs are in charge of the majority of these programs. The majority of these programs, I think, need to be managed during regular daytime, weekday hours. And that's when the people that they would interact with are available. Yet they work a 48-hour shift schedule where people are sleeping. And it's just not possible to deal with these issues during sleeping hours. So I think there's some solutions to that. One is to hire civilians to do these things rather than using the shift battalion chiefs. Another is to make the battalion chiefs, some of them at least, regular day shift workers. We've done that in the past where we've had them working staff hours, and we've had even a staff captain that was, work daytime hours. And I know in some ways that isn't the favorite thing, but the battalion chief primarily for the district serve a purpose of managing our suppression services during the shift, during a specific shift. Now, they don't have to. They could be working regular hours and have the same shifts every day, every week. We could have day shift, night shift, swing shift, and so forth, but we don't do it that way. But as long as they're going to work a 2-day schedule, I just don't think they can be in charge of things where they have to take phone calls and deal with the public and so forth during weekday daytime hours. And for $535,000, we could hire 2 or 3 civilians to take over these programs. And those civilians we could hire could have training in the areas that we need. Whereas most of these battalion chiefs don't have specific training. They certainly can learn some of these things, but they don't have training or backgrounds or whatever in it. And I just think we're using them as managers of program for which they're not qualified and for which they don't have time. So they then have to come back on their off days to do the work, and they don't have a regular schedule. So if in fact they work with the explorers, for example, and the explorers meet, on Thursday nights, well, they're not always on duty on Thursday nights. And even if they were on duty, their duty conflicts with going to the explorer meeting. So I just think that we're just not making good use of those people, and that we need a fix here. So anyway, that's what I'm recommending, is that we look hard at how we use the people, and we use the battalion chiefs to be true battalion chiefs. That is, managing whole resources, not figuring out something about facilities for which they're not trained.
Director, if I could just make a couple of clarifying comments related to those numbers that total up to 535,000. So, what I don't have right now is enough information to be able to inform me as to whether it's they're able to do some or all or most of their project management during their regular on-duty hours. I can't tell from this, except for a few items there, which programs are actually generating overtime for the battalion chiefs on their off days. There's a good chunk of that $535,000 that has nothing to do with programs, but it has to do with basically what we call constant staffing or backfill. And that is the OES deployments, the PTO, both scheduled and unscheduled, workers' comp, and bereavement. That's when somebody's vacant from a position because they're taking PTO or off on workers' comp, or they've been deployed on a strike team, which is reimbursable. Those are items that we, that have nothing to do with the program management. The other amounts that, again, I can certainly tell heavy rescue, the UAS, the training, those are programs that are generating overtime. That emergency operations bucket there, I don't know what's going into that and how much, that's one of those things that we'll know better in a year's time as to that. But it is possible that our facilities battalion chief might be doing the majority of the facilities work during his 48-hour shift. I don't know. Like I said, I don't have enough detail to be able to discern whether that's a financially wise thing or not. But that information, like I said, I wish I could provide you with better detailed information to make an informed decision, but we just don't have it right now. That's the end of my comments.
Okay. Well, thank you for the information. Any other comments on this item? Okay, move to item 10 then, which is the PPC summary report done by the ISO.
Sure, I'll take this and tee it up to John Johnston, who should, Michelle, if you could promote him, that would be great. This was a conversation that we had during our strategic planning committee, really valuable, and dealt with our water system. And also the request was made from our two board members there to elevate it up to the board to share the information with them. A lot of it has to do with our ISO rating. And I think some misconceptions that people might have as far as the impact of our water systems on our current ISO rating and some areas where we can improve it. And then I think some other general conversations about our water supply systems and what we actually have authority over and what we can control. So sorry, John, that you are getting us towards the end of the board meeting, but they are all yours.
All right, sounds good. I'll just start with a brief little synopsis of what we had from our strategic planning committee and then open it up obviously for questions. So the main item is in regards to our ISO rating, of which we're a little over 80 points. It puts us at a class 2. You need to be 90 to be a class 1. So what is impacting that? And there was concerns that water supply was the big one, and what can we do about it? The water supply is 40% of the score, of which out of 40 points, we have 34.02 points. So even if we obtained the rest of that, which is 5.98 points, that still would not get us enough points to be at the class 1. But out of that water supply, they look at 3 main areas. One is the supply system, which is the availability or capability of the water system to be able to meet the needed fire flows. And that's for buildings up to 3,500 GPM. So any buildings that are above 3,500 GPM, those buildings are individually scored or rated. Next is the size, type, and installation of fire hydrants, the availability of those throughout the district. And then lastly is the inspection and flow testing of fire hydrants.
John, excuse me 1 second. What page are you referring to? Are you on?
I'm on page 18.
Page 18 of the report, right?
Of the ISO report.
Hang on 1 second. Let me catch up with you.
Sure.
Okay, that's page 60 of the packet that we have.
So for the credit for the supply system, we got 26.83 points out of 30. And that water supply system, as you guys know, we have 5 different water purveyors within our district. And out of those 5 water purveyors, two of them are quite large, City of Menlo Park and Cal Water. Then our third one that is also large, but definitely covers a smaller area is the City of East Palo Alto, owns their own water. However, it is managed by Veolia. And then we have two small water purveyors that are running off of local wells and storage tanks, Palo Alto Park Mutual Water and O'Connor Water Districts. But those are pretty good points when really considering over that for the supply systems that are provided within our district. And as we know, our district is really changing from a 1 and 2 story home and business aspect to now seeing multiple 3 to 5 story residential buildings, and then multiple high rises, or at least buildings that are reaching 75 feet, multiple within our district now, which is definitely changing that water supply need. However, per this, the way the study goes, anything that's over 3,500 GPM, which would be those larger buildings, those are individually scored anyways, outside of this report. Next, credit for hydrants. We maxed out pretty much. We got 2.99 out of 3. So that's just because there's a couple of old World War I hydrants that are out that are getting replaced. And then the last one is credit for inspection and flow testing. That was 4.2 out of 7. That one, the fire district is doing what we can to improve that score. The water purveyors do not have any type of governing body over them that actually is requiring them to do inspection and flow testing. So the fire district actually does annual inspections so that we can have a higher score at the next time we would have this ISO rating performed. But when it comes to flow testing, the water purveyors are going to take the last available water flow as their numbers. And especially with the state of California and the droughts, they are not going to waste water. They have to account for water that is all used and lost, and they can even get fined. So we are finding that the water purveyors are very hesitant and will not do flow testing. And that is definitely an area that we see would not really change. So when it comes to ISO, the
Can I
other
ask a
area.
question about the flow
Sure.
testing, just so it's in line? On the, on subsequent pages, you have the hydrant flow data summary, and there's a bunch of measurements there. What is the source of those measurements? Did the ISO do that independently, or did that come from the purveyors?
I do not know that answer.
Okay,
My guess is that they would have obtained it from the purveyor, because the purveyors own those hydrants and would be providing the information, but I can't verify that.
because well over half of the hydrants don't meet the requirement that they have.
I can't speak to the test results of what they obtained. That's what they obtained.
But I ask this almost as a policy thing, just because I know you've actually interacted frequently with the water agencies. I had a conversation with my neighbor who is the president of the O'Connor Tract Water Company. And he was, I think he's totally ignorant of this, because he told me, he said, oh yeah, we have much higher flow, you know, and pressure than the district requires, and was very proud of that, which I accepted until I saw this report. And then I'm looking here and I'm seeing there, he's got less than 1,000 out of 4,000 or 5,000 needed. And I have this feeling that he has no idea that these numbers, one, I don't even know if these numbers are correct, but two, assuming they're correct, I don't think he has any idea of that. Is there anything we can do in terms of having a meeting with these people, or somehow informing them or showing them, or somehow getting them involved in what's happening here?
Well, there's a couple of things. Obviously, I can't speak to why an individual would not be aware of their own numbers. But when it comes to where we are at, yes, we do work with these water purveyors, and a lot of it is existing. So I can't speak to past practices. And as we know, modern laws and standards come into place, and we a lot of times ask for aging or older infrastructures to try to come up to current guidelines, standards, et cetera. So I would gather that, you know, a lot of this is asking older infrastructure to meet current aspects. We do not have the means to require any of that with the water purveyors. It is basically up to the developer to provide that water to their project, which is the only authority that the fire district has. And so that's done via several ways. I do know that, like with O'Connor Water, they are doing water infrastructure improvements to their system, but the service they provide is pretty minimal for their customers. Where most of the homes, what they serve is mainly single family homes, so they do not have a big demand. But I would have to look and see what and how that test was performed to verify that.
Okay, thanks.
Buck?
Yes, go ahead, Jim.
John, I just, I read the draft water report that came out of East Palo Alto. It was from last month. And, the one section, and I'll read it here, it says only 42% of the hydrants in the city meet fire flow requirements under the future demand scenario. So could you help me with that? I mean, it says future demand scenario. Does that mean they're projecting additional demands on the system?
So what they're saying is that if the city were to get built out and they did no improvements to the water system, that would be the percent that they're deficient. And so basically this is their justification sentence that says, hey, if you want to grow, you need to invest into your system because your system will be this deficient for the future, which for the city really is saying, hey, you need to invest into your infrastructure so that developers will invest in your community, because developers are not going to build where they can't.
Is it fair to say if the scenario played out and the improvements weren't made and only 42% of the hydrants in the city met fire flow requirements, ISO 1 rating for us would be even further away?
Yes, you would see that score drop, but it would depend on the building that gets built. So if the building exceeds 3,500 GPM, then that building is going to get an individual score, and it will not be related to the scoring that's here, at least the way I'm seeing that it's reading. So,
okay. I know we're going to talk about this at our next committee meeting, so we can go into greater detail then. Thank you.
So just to kind of continue on with this ISO report, 50% of the scoring is related to fire department, and the services that we provide relates to our training, operational considerations, et cetera. So we received 36.36 points out of 50. So we do have a room to gain on that, and that is our biggest area that we can see improvements. But I will say that I do know from when this report was done, the district under Fire Chief Harold Schroppelhammond did put into play a number of practices, et cetera, to address where we were missing points. And so I do believe that we would be able to see an increase in points due to where we knew that we could make improvements internally, whether it dealt with staffing, improvements in training, records, et cetera. So I did take a look at the ISO website to look and see about frequencies, because typically we're looking at like a 10-year time frame typically between when this would be performed. And it does say that we do have the option that anytime we have significant changes, that we can actually contact them to be able to address the significant changes and see how that would impact our scoring. So I do believe that we have the ability to do some internal review and see, what we could, where we could see improvements, and if it is something worth considering that we believe that we would change our ISO rating, or what additional things we would need to do. So with that, will open it up to full questions, whether it's related to water or if it's related to ISO. Again, I'm not a professional at it yet, but I'll do my best.
I have,
Jim?
oh, go ahead. Is that Robert?
Yeah, I just have a quick question for
Go ahead,
John.
Robert.
John, this report, how often does the report come out? I see this, it was July 1st, 2017. Yeah, how long is this report good for?
So I tried to contact them to see if they are on a schedule, but on their website, they do not indicate any type of a schedule. But for most people, I've heard it seems to be about a 10-year time frame. However, again, we do have the ability to contact them if we believe we have significant changes that would impact any part of the scoring, and then an evaluation could occur.
So in terms of the water capacity, and you mentioned that this report indicated there was, I guess, 3, 4 actually water companies that will provide a water supply to the cities. Was that correct, or was it 3?
We have 5.
5, and I think 2 of them were in East Palo Alto. 1 is in O'Connor's, which is, I guess, Menlo Park, and then West.
We have City of Menlo Park, and then we have Cal Water.
Cal Water, City of Menlo Park. So O'Connor's, is that in Menlo Park or East Palo Alto?
Park, they might have a couple of East Palo Alto customers, but they're mainly
Menlo Park.
Yeah.
Okay. So was part of that in terms of the commercial structure, in terms of building, the updates, because what I do know about the city of East Palo Alto, they have tapped into a water supply system over there close to Gloria Way, on the corner of Gloria Way and Bay Road. Was that part of that report, or is that this 2017 report?
I do not believe it was online at the time of this report.
Okay.
However, that Gloria Bay well is only a
backup system.
Water. It provides water, but there's no storage.
Right.
And so it just provides an additional capacity. But I believe when it comes to what would be improvements for fire availability, that pump does not really do that. It's mainly for potable consumption.
Okay.
It gets blended into the city water.
So how many in terms of is each city rated? Because I didn't read the whole report.
No, it is not. This is for the fire district as a whole.
But as the fire district needs certain capacity from each of the areas that is serviced, like Menlo Park, Atherton, and East Palo Alto, the assumption is that from those water that's within those cities, the district will rely heavily on those from the cities regarding their water supply.
We do, but the way the scoring, from the way I'm seeing it, this is just one component that insurance companies can use to determine an insurance rate. They may not even use this. Some insurance companies may not. They just say, you know what, we don't want to utilize this. We're going to do our own risk assessment or utilize our own tool. This just is a popular one that can rate a fire district's capability to be able to contain and reduce fire from any type of propagation. And that's really what they're looking at, is what's the minimum, what's the capabilities of the fire district to be able to have trained people and the resources available to them, and to be able to respond quickly at the proper amount of resources, which water is also a resource, to be able to contain and extinguish a fire. And then that's where you'll actually see there's actually extra credit. So just like in high school, they provide extra credit for fire prevention or community risk reduction. So if you can actually prevent fire from happening, you get a few points. And that's really all this ISO rating is doing, is just trying to, how can they mitigate risk and loss for insurance companies?
So does that, one last question, does that, when you start talking about height, 4 or 5 stories, does this report indicate a certain height limitation based upon water availability?
It does not. So that number 3,500 gallons per minute is a number that's in the California Fire Code. It's actually in the International Fire Code. And basically, there's a lot of factors that go into play on how you get to that number. One of them is the building size and square footage. And then the other is the building construction type. So it gives developers options. So for example, in Menlo Park, where they have really good water in their industrial area, the developers can actually do a lesser construction method, which can save them in construction dollars because of having a better water supply. Where in East Palo Alto, due to not having a good water supply and not providing that, the developers have no choice that if they want to build the building, they have to build at a higher construction type, which is more expensive to be able to possibly build their building. And what it is, it's basically turns what maybe could have been a lightweight construction utilizing lumber inside and out. They now have to go to concrete and steel. So it's.
So one last thing, I'm sorry. So in terms of, so that it for East Palo Alto again, so the capacity, the water capacity, that does that equate to the amount of water coming through the pipes, being able to go up the stories of the building?
No, it literally is the available water that's in the pipes under the ground. It's up to the fire district to get it out of the ground and get it where we want it to go.
Okay, not the quality of pipes.
No, but quality of pipe definitely makes a difference on how the water gets from point A to point B.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Virginia?
So John, are you saying that we'll never hit that 40 points? Is that what I'm hearing? Or what your conclusion is, or am I misinterpreting that?
Well, it's not in our purview to be able to, force the water purveyors to do something
Right.
that there's no requirement, and especially if they would get fined for a good portion of that. And again, it depends on what our goal is. Our goal already is by state law, we have to hold any builder to be able to provide the water that's available for us to fight a fire and for their systems to work. So whether the city or the water purveyor provides that water or not, we still hold that builder to the minimum state code through other measures. So we are already achieving that goal when it comes to safety for the fire district side.
So basically, it sounds like we may never achieve this class 1 status then? Is that the other thing I'm hearing?
No, I think that it is highly possible if we look at really where most points are available, which is in the fire department section. I think for us to try to pin it on water supply, even if we got the full 40 points, it does not make us a class 1.
Right, I heard that. Okay.
Yeah. So I think we need to focus on the things we have the ability to change. We do not have the ability to change water.
Okay.
But
So we have been working on this accreditation thing for years, right? How long? 4 years by 2022, at least 4 years, right? So how, and I don't know how much money we've spent on dealing with this. And we're now coming up with some answers, but I mean, how much longer do we need to even look at this class 1 accreditation, which was brought up by other board members, and I think even the our firefighters association that wanted a class 1.
You don't mean accreditation. I just, Virginia, that's a separate process.
I know, but this is all tied to that.
Well, I'm not sure that's the case, but
I don't believe so.
Okay, well, then I'm misinterpreting it. Okay, well, then I'll ask that question later. Thanks, John.
I wanted to ask some question, but I saw someone's hand. Well, John, let me ask you, and I just as a general matter, did you receive that yourself? Did you receive this report back in 2017?
The entire district did. It's been on our website since then.
Okay, so you've seen it before. Could I ask you, and I'm sure I'm really not picking on you, I'm just curious, on page 22 of the report, page 64 of our packet, there's some specific things that relate to fire prevention, and I'm really surprised by what I'm seeing here, and I'm not bringing this up in any way as a negative, because I think I'm very pleased with the job you do, but I wondered if you could explain some of these things, like the second one down from the top, the fire prevention staffing, where we only get half the points. And the next one in particular, where the certification and training, we get almost no points.
So I was not in charge of the Prevention Bureau at that time, so I cannot speak to what information was provided or given, but I will state, as mentioned, after this ISO scoring came into place, a number of measures were taken by the fire chief at the time to improve the scoring. So since 2017 to now, you'll know that fire prevention staffing has increased. And also when it comes to certification and training throughout the district, there's been heavy changes in training to address a lot of the scoring that took place, which also deals with prevention. So my assumption is that since 2017, these points would be going a lot higher.
So let me ask you about in the middle of the page where it talks about fire safety education programs. Again, not a very good score. Would your comment be the same there? That was, I mean, because we've had a pretty active education program going, but did we not back in 2017?
I guess there's a varying opinion there. I think the score is pretty decent there for public fire safety education, 34 out of 40. I don't know
I was
what.
looking at the one just above it, the 24 out of 30.
Yeah, I don't know how they base their scoring, so I don't know what items they would see being missing, but I would gather when you look at all of the fire departments that they have across the country, for us to have a class 2 is pretty amazing. We're still in top tier for fire districts and for fire departments throughout the country. So
we look at Redwood City and they got class 1, and Mountain View has class 1. I'm not sure. I agree with you on that, but let me ask you again, in the bottom part of that page where it's the investigator certification and training, again, very low score. Has that been improved also in the?
I believe so. I believe the reason those were low is there was no tracking of training and certification. So now that was one of those improvements that was taking place. But again, so these two scores, just so you know, are extra credit.
No, and I understand that. And I know they're not enough to get to the 9 points and so forth. Let me ask you on page 17 of the report, or page 59 of this. I look at B there, where training, we get less than 11 of 25 points. Do you have any insights into that area?
No, I was not a chief officer at that time, which is kind of where I get into. I know a lot of practices have been put into place since then, and a lot of that was involved with training. So,
and there's something somewhere else, I don't know where I saw it, about something about our ladder trucks or whatever, not not being deployed correctly or something? Again, any insights into that one?
No, I'm going to stick to my original comment at the beginning that I'm not a professional on this. I was not a chief officer at the time. And so I don't want to speak on stuff I don't know about with this original report since I was not involved fully in it. I just know some remnants that came out from it.
Okay, sorry, I didn't mean to put spotlight on you. It just,
No, that's all right. I don't mind. I'm answering honestly.
this was eye-opening for me.
One last question I have, Chuck.
Go ahead,
before we
Robert.
finish. John, I just noticed, I know you mentioned that there were some areas where you can, we can probably improve on. I just scanned through the page 64, the rating sheets and their earned credit. Just on a rough scan, look like there's 30 points there that we can actually improve upon in terms of getting more points in the areas. For example, I don't know if you're there or not, the fire prevention, you mentioned that the certification and training, 0.16, and it requires 6, above that, fire prevention staffing, 4.23, they've offered 8. When you start adding all that up, potentially, if we're going to improve on just that page, it seemed like we can get 30 points real quick, potentially.
Yeah, that's the thing. It is an easy document to read, and I think it is very obvious for us to be able to know what we can look into achieving the best bang for our buck to achieve that.
Yeah, I have a comment upon this, and I listened very carefully when our deputy chief Long presented the information, but this report was never given to the board, and I'm embarrassed that I never requested it, nor did I even know it existed. But it was eye-opening for me. We were told that the reason we did not have a class 1 was simply because of water pressure, and we probably never could do it. And
That's right.
there were no neighboring agencies. And then lo and behold, a year or two later, we find out Redwood City's got it, Mountain View's got it. And we put so much more resources into what we do, staffing, apparatus, and I just feel we were misled. I am shocked. And it could be one of two things. Either we were lied to, which is one possibility, or it's possible that the leadership the chief officers didn't understand what this was. But this was something that I think, it's not easy to read, but it's certainly accessible to anyone. You don't need to be a trained firefighter to understand what these criteria are. And it just seems like we should have been a class 1, and somehow the district didn't do its homework, didn't keep its records, didn't do what needed to be done. And then nobody took responsibility for saying we could do a lot better, we're going to do better. Instead, it was like, oh, it's East Palo Alto's fault. We put all the blame on East Palo Alto, and that simply isn't correct. So
That's why I equated the two, Chuck, exactly, basically what you've just said. That's why I was equating this information with our ISO and the accreditation, all of it together.
Yeah, so I just feel we were seriously misled. Nobody ever rectified it in terms of other chief officers. And until we pushed hard to get this, and I guess it was at the water committee, Jim, that did this, or was it strategic planning, or who asked for this report?
I think strategic planning did.
Okay, well, thank you for doing that, because this really was eye-opening. This is something that would save our residents some bit of money, certainly in their fire insurance, if we could get a 1. And I would like us to consider getting some assistance with improving these scores, getting the ISO to come out again, and getting ourselves up to 95 or wherever we should be on this. Just out of curiosity, what rating did you have in your county?
We were it was a 5/6, so not very good, but we had some urban areas and some really incredibly rural areas, and like like John was saying, you get lumped in as an entire district.
Right.
So, and just now, John and I are reaching out professionally to agencies. I already reached out to Chief Iverson with Redwood City to see if they had somebody assist them through this. We have to imagine there's somebody's a subject matter expert on the ISO ratings and can help us sharpen our pencils and update our records. So, like John had mentioned, we've already done quite a bit that will help us improve our scores. And before we invite ISO back to review, we want to make sure we've got everything covered and get every point we possibly can.
Terrific. Okay. Any other comments or questions or? Well, thank you, Strategic Planning Committee, for getting a copy of this. Boy, was that eye-opening to read that. And I'm embarrassed and ashamed of myself as a member of the board for having spent 5 years without asking for this document. Okay, let's move on then to item number 11. Am I right here? I'm sorry, I lost my place. Yeah, item number 11, committee reports, emergency preparedness.
Director Jones? You're on mute.
Robert? Oh. Emergency Preparedness Committee report? You're still on mute, Robert. Oh, there you go.
Yeah, I don't have anything. Chief Virginia, you have anything you want to tell?
I had a quick question. I know that Chief, y'all went to visit Coastside Fire to get an understanding of what their CERT program was like, and I don't know if you have any information you want to give us on that.
Sure. It was last Thursday, Andres and I went and paid a visit to Coastside and Cynthia Sherrill, just to Cheryl, yes, to try and steal every good idea that they had, and they had a lot. A little bit different organization than ours there, but really helpful for us as we're trying to reset and revamp our program. Obviously, as everyone's aware, Ryan Zollicoffer has been offered a job with the city of Milwaukee as their emergency services or emergency management director. So that's a loss for us. And obviously, maybe gives us some abilities also as we try and figure out where we're moving next. So next step, Andres is setting up a meeting with Dave Cosgrave, who was out there in Coastside and now works for San Mateo DEM. So we're going to sit down and chat with him. But yeah, progress is being made. Looking forward to it. That's it for me.
Okay.
Thank you.
Human resources.
Yeah, we met. We talked about the chief's evaluation, which Francine has given all of us. The accreditation project. We reviewed the status for the compensation project report, in which we had some of it on closed session. Robert, you want to add anything?
I have nothing to add. Thank you, Rob.
Okay, thank you, Robert. Thank you, Chuck.
Okay. Strategic planning.
We had two items. One was the ISO rating and water issues. John Johnston provided us with a copy of a draft report that the city of East Palo Alto prepared, and we'll be delving into that a little deeper at our meeting next month. And the other item was accreditation. Chief Lorenzen is going to provide us with kind of an overview of where we're at in that effort, and what's been accomplished, and what what remains and some recommendations on moving forward with that. So Rob, anything you'd add to that?
No, Jim, you covered it. Thank you.
I have a question that related, is John Johnston still available there? I don't know if he can still hear me. Perhaps, oh, it looks.
I am still here.
Thank you. I wanted to ask about the approval of waivers and the authority and what the board's potential involvement and so forth. Just as an example, where IKEA could not meet the water requirement itself for having sufficient water pressure and so forth, it was required to build a cistern under the building to provide water. That is my understanding. Maybe I have the facts slightly wrong, but I think that's correct. That was something that we as the district, or I know you weren't in charge then, but the fire marshal would have had to approve. Is that correct?
Correct. So there are provisions in the code that allows the authority having jurisdiction and the fire marshal to be able to approve other measures to be able to meet the code.
And is that an authority that the board delegated to the fire marshal, or does state code delegate that to the fire marshal?
It's an authority that the fire chief delegates.
I see. So it's given to the fire chief by state code and delegated to the fire marshal?
Yes.
Okay. Because it seems like with all the potential building going on in East Palo Alto and perhaps other jurisdictions, that these kinds of things may be coming back to us again. And I'm just wondering whether the board could, if the board could somehow be apprised of when those waivers are being sought. And
Well, I think that's where we have to be careful. We're not giving waivers. So we are not allowed to go less than minimum state code. So when a building is being approved, we have to make sure that they meet or exceed code. So when they cannot obtain water supply, then there are provisions in the code that dictate how they can provide that water supply. So those tanks that are in there are a method and that the code allows that they can do that. And an example would be, you go to most of rural America and somebody wants to build a building, there are not water supplies out there. So they provide the water on site. We are just used to, a built out California that has very robust water systems, and it's generally provided underground. And so but that's the thing, is we are versed in, the multiple ways to be able to provide that water, to be able to provide the safety that's needed for those buildings. So we are not providing a waiver.
Chief
well,
Johnson,
it's not a waiver, but does the alternative need to be approved by the by the fire chief or not?
It's approved by myself through the authority given to me by the fire chief.
So, so we just would call that a regular approval. In other words, it's not a special approval.
Correct, because as long as they show that they meet the current code, I cannot deny it.
Chief
Okay.
Johnson,
So
Yes,
even if that water would, I'm making this up, even if the water would only last for 2 or 3 hours or something, that would meet the code?
They have their job as a builder. They have licensed architects and professionals. They are to put in their submittals how their project meets the California building and fire codes. And our job is to verify that what they are submitting does meet that code. So.
Okay. Robert, I'm sorry. Did you have a question?
yes, Chief Johnson, of the property developments over in the Ravens Desert area, and that's pretty much, I think, besides the Sobrado project over on University. Those are the major areas that I know who probably will need, because of the height limitation. Have any of them submitted their plans and with the modification of the need for a tank? I know that Light Tree Apartment had to put in a water tank over where they, where the new developments, modification.
So the Sobrato building that's on the corner of Donahoe and University,
Yeah,
they submitted plans a while back ago, and they do have a parking structure that has a tank that is a part of that design. That is the only building that we have that is approved that has that. No other buildings have really been able to come through because basically there's a building moratorium in East Palo Alto.
actually, the sanitation is blocking everybody from doing everything.
Correct.
So,
But we even have a couple of tanks over in Menlo Park, over in the M2 area, just as because it's required. Even if you have good water, once you reach certain building types or sizes, you're still required to have on-site water storage. So, and again, that's our job. So just because you have poor water doesn't mean that requires water storage. Even when you have good water, the code says, you know what, you're going to provide water because of possible failures or deficiencies. And so we have, like, the Hotel Nia has water storage as required by code. And they have amazing water out there.
Okay, thank you. I'd forgotten to ask about the waiver earlier, so thank you. And I was
Yep.
asking as part of the strategic planning report. Virginia, finance?
No, we got everything approved tonight, so thank you.
Okay. Number
Do you have
12,
anything, Chuck?
no, I don't have anything to add. I go through the liaison reports and anything from Atherton?
No, nothing to report.
Nothing from East Palo Alto? City of Menlo Park, anything?
Yes. I was speaking with the chief, and I think he and Justin Murphy, the new city manager, are trying to figure out when they're going to set up the meeting, and so they're talking right now. I don't know if the chief has anything to add. Chief, I don't know if you
I am
gotten
meeting
anything.
with Justin week after next, and we will hopefully have something set up and set up an agenda soon.
That's
Okay,
all I have.
County of San Mateo, Rob?
I have nothing.
Okay, and Virginia, the Emergency Medical Joint Powers Authority.
Yes, so we don't have a meeting until September, but Chief Lorenzen spoke with was it Chief Myers,
Yeah.
Mark, who's the chair of the chief committee, or I think he's on the board of the JPA. So I don't know, Mark, do you want to give just a quick update? Because it is something that I want us to have out in the public right now, because I don't want the September meeting to be canceled.
So,
So this is like notice that we want the September meeting to happen.
so what's interesting, and this is a good opportunity to share with the board what's happening with AMR. They're still, AMR is our private ambulance transport provider. They're still struggling with paramedic shortages. And so in the past, we experienced a couple instances where they showed up with an ambulance with 2 EMTs on it. So it was basic life support. And then they grabbed our paramedic to accompany a patient to the hospital that was needing paramedic services. And then I believe also then charged the patient for paramedic level services. And there was no reimbursement to us or any consideration given back to a local agency. So that being said, there's some conversations going on right now between Ron Myers, he's the North County Fire Protection District Chief, and AMR. They're talking about having a fee that would be directly reimbursed to local government. Should that occurrence happen again, they're anticipating it might, though it will be infrequent. Right now, they're talking about a fee that's in the range of $400 per instance. And for AMR, that's at the level where it's painful. I believe it's going to be painful enough for them where they won't want to use it as the easy button. And I believe that additional fee that they'd pay to us actually exceeds what the additional reimbursement would be to them by quite a bit. So those conversations are going on right now. Obviously, I'm just in the awareness side. It would have to go back to the JPA for approval, but I know that had been a conversation that our board had had in the past. Was that concept of trying to at least reimburse the local fire agencies for providing that additional service. So it's not something we're super interested in doing, but we want to keep the system afloat. We think it will have relatively little impact on us and be infrequently utilized. So that's it for me.
Chief, just a comment. When we got a report on this before, as I recall, they charged $6,000 to the patient for transport to the hospital. So $400 is nothing.
Well,
And-
so that's what I have said, not about this, not in comparison to the $6,000 check, but I agree that $400 is not that much. So I don't know what that needs to be, or, I mean, it hasn't even been discussed at the JPA level, but I'm just wondering if, I mean, we do have an ad hoc committee for ambulance services. If that ad hoc committee wants to give some thought that I can bring back to the meeting in September. Of,
And
as to how our role, what our role should be, how we should be charged, or how we should be reimbursed. But I mean, I don't know. I'm just throwing that out there because I'm pretty disappointed in how the whole ambulance JPA meetings have gone. They've had canceled meetings, this and that, and I think one of the main reasons that my Chief Myers is involved in this and with AMR is that all of the AMR employee, or well, the JPA employees are under the Daly City HR group, department, and they're basically employees of Daly City, if you will. So I don't know if we want to prepare for something that y'all want me or the chief to present to the JPA board. I don't even know what they're going to be discussing. I think that they've been given some instructions on some things, but who knows what's going to happen.
Yeah, I'd be a little hesitant, Virginia, to get the ambulance services ad hoc committee kind of in action because it hasn't been needed up to now.
Right. And I'm just throwing it out there. I'm not saying we should. If
But-
we're going to be on the same page and y'all want me to represent the fire district, right? I'm happy to
Yeah,
to bring information.
Chief, I would urge you to tell them our minimum is $2,000. And
Well, I think that we need to have that. That's why I think that, I don't know. We need to have that discussion,
Yeah.
but I agree. I thought $400,
Let
that's
me-
nothing.
Let me get some better numbers for you. I think that 6,000 number seems incredibly high. I think it's significantly lower, but let
Well,
me get
but
the
I mean,
actual
Chief-
information.
Chief,
Oh, yeah.
even if it's $3,000 or $4,000, I know that our some of our residents have to pay $3,000 to $4,000 within the district, and that was in 2019 or 2018.
right.
So anyway, whatever it is, I still think $400 is a drop in the bucket compared to what people have to pay.
We had a person come to our meeting to
That's who I
complain,
was referring to. I know the.
about the price that he had to pay for it. And I believe it was $6,000. So
No, I think it was closer to like 3,400 or something like that. I know the person.
okay. Anyway, let's move on then. The ad hoc committee, we've had our diversity, equity, and inclusion session. I assume there's nothing else on that issue.
Not for me. I haven't seen it over. Let's see.
Okay. And then the water companies, we've already had that discussion.
Yeah, I have nothing to add.
Okay, and the ambulance service, again, that has not been activated. And
No, not yet, Chuck.
not yet.
And
Okay,
I'm not sure it will be, but I just want to put it out there so that we are ready and prepared.
there was, by the way, for what it's worth, and I mentioned it to the chief, because just so you're aware of it, in this report we just looked at on the ISO rating, we lost some points for dispatch. and I'm not sure what the issue was there, but for whatever reason, dispatch was not doing great. We know they haven't done well from a timing standpoint, but it affected the ISO rating as well. So please don't cooperate too quickly with the county on this. What about reports and requests from directors? Anything?
A quick question. So, Chief, now that I don't, and you probably haven't even had a chance to think about it, but with Ryan's departure, at some point, we probably should think about how that's going to be restructured, or, I mean, I don't even know, just because the CERT part is under that area, and how, I mean, is that something that the Emergency Preparedness Committee should be discussing, or what, in terms of how we move forward with our community emergency response teams and preparedness at the retail constituent level?
So we'll make sure we don't miss anything in the interim. We'll have a contingency, kind of a continuity of operations plan. I'm meeting with Andres tomorrow to talk about just that, what we're doing in the interim. But yeah, that will all be part of the plan that's due to the board in the beginning of the fourth quarter of the calendar year this year. And ePrep will absolutely be involved as we talk
Okay.
about strategies.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
But when you said fourth quarter, what months are you speaking of?
Sometime between October and December.
Of the calendar
Calendar
year.
year, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, because we just finished the fourth quarter.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. I wasn't trying to buy time.
Okay, and President's report, I just have a real quick comment because I have been very, I would say strongly negative about things, and I know that sometimes it rubs people the wrong way, but I am an idealist and I believe that we can always do a lot better than we're doing. But I do feel that we're actually making progress. Even as I read reports that I feel like we should have gotten a long time ago, the positive is that we're getting these reports and we're seeing what could be done. And the things Robert presented today, I mean, we see some issues that I think we've all felt weren't exactly right. And that was one of the reasons that I thought this ad hoc committee would be important. And I think we're actually seeing how great a need there is for some change and reform in the things that we're doing. And I'm actually very, I'm encouraged. I mean, all these new problems we've got, water pressure, ambulance service, inclusivity, all of those things are things that we're actually, for the first time, really talking about, learning about, and starting to make plans to address. So I think that's all very positive, and I just wanted to say thank you for everyone's participation in doing that. And I'm excited about the next 6 months, and if I should be reelected to the board for the 4 years after that. So I'm looking forward to making progress on all these areas. So that's all I wanted to say in my president's report. We're up at the point of public comment number 3. Michelle, could you call for that, please?
Yes, if anyone has a public comment, please use the raise hand feature or press *9 if you called in. I see no raised hands. Director Bernstein, you may continue.
Okay. Any last comments before we adjourn? Seeing none, I will adjourn the meeting at 10:20 p.m. until our next meeting, August 16th.
Great, thank you.
Thank
Good
you
night,
all.
everyone.